I think the best part of this episode is when this woman she goes to this high class orgy with with Roderick and with Liam Dempsey. And she takes these fancy new cyber drugs, and then she sees her friend's ex girlfriend, who she thinks is dead, kung fu fighting Stubbs at this party. Like just full on like roundhouse kicks to the robot face and throwing each other off ledges. And she's like, "Man, that's sure something. These really are some great drugs." Is her response, which I think is just perfect. You know, like that stuff in Harry Potter where Harry's like, "But how do the Muggles not see all of the magical stuff that's happening?" And the wizards are always like, "Man, Muggles don't notice anything." That's what this is. Like, humans have an infinite capacity to just accept wacky shit happening around them, and this woman is completely unfazed by Dolores kung fu fighting robots who she thought was dead. Anyway, welcome to this live stream. We're going to talk about Westworld Season 3, Episode 4. And this one was a funny one. All of the previous episodes have had quite a clear, distinct focus on like one topic, one character, whereas this episode sort of brought all the threads together. The earlier episodes sort of introduced each piece, and here they all sort of came clashing together with like Dolores and Maeve and Bernard and Jesse Pinkman. It all came crashing together. I find it hilarious that Jesse, where is he? Jesse still doesn't Jesse still doesn't realize that he's in a show about robots. I find that really funny. He's just running around like just trying to like help this like cool hot Evan Rachel Wood who he met. And you know he wants to help her fight the system, man, but he doesn't realize that he's actually participating in a robot revolution. He's just completely clueless. And I'm excited to see what happens when he finally works out what's happening. Um, I think that one of the interesting parts of this episode, I mean, obviously we had the reveal that yes, all of the he does personals now. Someone says in the chat, yeah. No, I think I mean obviously we had the reveal that all of the Charlotte and the Martin and indeed this Sato slash Musashi character, they all are actually copies of Dolores. Those 5 pearls, well, at least 4 of the pearls that Dolores took out of Westworld were blank, and she just copied herself onto them, and now we've got all these copies of Dolores running around, just like Agent Smith in the Matrix. She's like a virus. She's like grey goo. She's going to take over everything, and that's all. That's all well and good. But like when we saw Musashi, like if you don't remember, in season 2, episode 7, 6. 7, 5, Akane no Mai, we were introduced to these Shogun World characters who were like Japanese equivalents of the Westworld characters. And Maeve had this decision at the end where like she like made friends and was hanging out with these Japanese hosts, and then she's like, "Hey, come along with me and like let's escape this theme park. Like, you know, you're in a theme park, right? Let's get out of here." But the hosts, Musashi and Akane, were just like, "No, we'd rather stay here." And Maeve's like, "Well, I respect your choice. If you want to stay in the park, you can stay in the park." And my issue with that was that these guys can't really make a meaningful choice about whether or not they want to stay in the park when they don't fully understand they're in a park. These guys never actually fully understood that they were robots in a theme park and nothing is real. Maeve could have helped them understand that because Maeve got this psychic power to like awake people, and she almost used that on Akane, but then she didn't. So I think this choice that Musashi and Akane made to stay in Shogun World was not a real choice, which of course is also the theme that they explore this episode with William. They're saying like, was it really William's choice to kill Emily because he thought Emily wasn't real, so was it really a choice? And so Sato slash Musashi slash Dolores, this character, says, "Did you really give me a choice? Was it a real meaningful choice when Musashi decided to stay in Shogun World?" And so in this moment, I was like, man, this is actually really cool because we're bringing back the character of Musashi and we're actually sort of haunting Maeve with the question of, you know, whether she actually did the right thing. You made that decision for us, for all of us, he says. which I thought was really great. I thought, Maeve was going to have to actually process and like actually deal with the consequences of that decision. But then it's revealed that this Musashi Sato character is actually just a copy of Dolores. So it's not really Musashi, it's just Dolores. Which, I mean, it's fine in its own right. But I'm a bit disappointed that, I can't, like, I think Maeve... I think Maeve is using her power irresponsibly, is my problem. Because, like, so much of Maeve's story and all of Westworld's story is about how, like, hey, it's wrong to objectify and use people, even if you think they're robots, even if they're hosts. You just can't go around people... You just can't go around killing people and abusing people because it's evil. Like that's why the hosts needed to escape Westworld. And yet Maeve spends so much of this episode just murdering people. Maeve kills like 5-10 people this episode, which I feel like really just doesn't jive with her whole story, which is about like humanizing and humanizing people. I don't know. I won't rant. But welcome. We're going to talk about this episode. If you got burning questions, chuck them in the chat. We'll discuss them. Tyler in the chat says, "What's up with the red pearl?" So yeah, that is confusing. The whole Bernard's pearl situation is confusing because last episode we saw that Dolores, as far as we knew, she had 5 pearls. Because we know that she left Westworld with these 5 pearls, and then last episode we saw that she had these 4 pearls plus the pearl that was inside Charlotte's head, so it seemed like 5 pearls total. One of them was red, and we were told that the red pearl was Bernard's pearl. See here. But if that's the red pearl, why was it not red before? It was black before. And also we get these very confusing shots of Charlotte making something, Dolores rather, making something in the mesa before she leaves the park. She has a pearl, a black pearl here. We saw these in flashbacks in episode 2 as well. And we get these shots of like Bernard being created at Arnold's house, but you can see the black bars, so it's like in a digital simulation cradle thing. But, like, Dolores couldn't have created Bernard in a digital simulation out in the real world, because the digital simulation is the cradle, which is inside Westworld, right? So, like, did she create Bernard in the park before she left, or did she create Bernard in the real world after she left? I thought Season 2 made it pretty clear that she created Bernard in the real world. But all this stuff muddies the waters. If we actually want to count the pearls... far as I can tell, there's the real Dolores. Well, no, except she doesn't count with the 5 because it's Dolores plus 5. So I mean, it's more like there's 6 pearls in play. So there's like the real Dolores, and then there's Charlotte who's really Dolores, then there's Martin who's really Dolores, then there's Musashi who's really Dolores, then there's Bernard who's the red pearl, and then I guess there's another pearl if you include Dolores in that count. So... Christ, it is still confusing. We'll try and figure this out before the video. Anyway, all right, thanks for the super chat from Matty Who. Thanks for the super chat from Pixelily. Pixelily says, "What was in those barrels?" So with this Musashi character, it looks like he has set himself up. So this is actually Dolores. So we can call him Doloresashi or something. He's taken over the Yakuza in Singapore, and he's got these barrels full of like white host milk goo. And I think the implication is that this Dolores Musashi is using this as a base to manufacture her own off-brand hosts, I assume. Because that's why she's got the white goo that's used to make hosts. So I think that like her whole thing is that like she wants to control Westworld so that she can continue making hosts and take over the world. But I guess this is like an extra backup additional way of making hosts in the cover of being some kind of like Yakuza distillery that's secretly a robot factory. I think that makes sense. I don't know if she would be successful in making hosts if she doesn't have the technology from the Westworld Park, but I think that's what she's trying to do. Thanks for the super chat from Michael, who says, "How did Maeve get her powers?" So in Season 2, Maeve... discovered a new voice was the wording she used. So Maeve had this yellow glow thing, this glowing effect that happened. And apparently, what she's using the mesh network is the term they use. It's like a Wi-Fi thing that influences the things around the host so that they can like communicate and network with each other. And Maeve has somehow learned to manipulate that mesh network as a way to influence other hosts. So she was able to like control these ninjas. She made like a ninja kill himself at this moment, and she also like can see into people's minds. Like she played, like she saw some of Akane's memories and stuff. So she's like full on crazy psychic. She also like was like waking Akane to freedom, but then Akane said, "Oh, don't do that," so she didn't. So she has a lot of like general super OP powers to control other hosts, and she's also like a super hacker man in this episode. She just like hacks her way through passcodes and controls the automatic aiming guns and stuff like that. So she's got a lot of crazy powers. In episode 2 of this season, they were suggesting that she didn't have the powers anymore. But it seems as though that was just because it was in a simulation, and she actually does have all her powers. So yeah, she is still super OP. And yeah, I wish that someone as powerful as Maeve would choose to be more responsible in how she uses her powers. Because she does murder so many people, and it's like, did she really need to kill all those people? Anyway, thanks for the super chat from The Real Yi, who says that the actor who played Musashi was in the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. Act cool. Okay. So I'll just run through sort of chronologically, I think. Someone in the chat says, does Dolores have the same power as Maeve? No. Maeve, we've never seen Dolores control other hosts with her mind, and we've never seen Dolores be a super hacker man. So they have a different set of powers, just like humans do, you know? Which I think is cool. I think one of the other really cool parts of this episode was we got to understand Serac. Because Maeve is like, Singapore's cool, but, why don't you show me a different city? Why don't you show me Paris? And I think it's really funny. I think that, like, every, like, Hollywood screenwriter and, like, Americans just seem to think that Paris is, like, the only cool European city. It's like in Bioshock Infinite, It's like the mythical Paris, man. There's more than one cool European city. But Serac is like, yeah, man, Paris really was cool. But then it blew up, and that was a downer. Paris blew up. So this relates to some of the this relates to one of, those like circle Rehoboam shots that we've gotten throughout the series. There was a trailer that had like a timeline of the Westworld universe with like the white background and the black circle. And it said that there was a thermonuclear incident at Paris some years ago. And it seems as though that disaster is what motivated a young Serac to control the world. He thinks that it's justified to control the world if it can prevent these kinds of disasters happening. So I really like this because it's an actual like logical, understandable reason why this person would want to do what he does. He wants to control the world, and he thinks that it's justified to take away everyone's free will if it means that entire cities will stop blowing up, which, is a pretty reasonable argument. So, you might agree with Serac that he's doing the right thing. So that goes to the heart of all these like questions of free will that Westworld's asking around, like, what's the point of free will if it just gets people killed? Lumix, thanks for the super chat, says, outside of the flashbacks, do you think any scenes in this episode were in a simulation? Well, I think that William's conversation with this Emily at the start, that wasn't real. I mean, this is William in his house in the real world, I think, but Emily is dead, and she's a personification of William's grief, which we're told pretty explicitly. So William's just going a bit nuts. And then this scene explicitly is a simulation because of the black bars. And this is the process of Bernard being created, the new Bernard. And I think that the black bars imply that this is a digital simulation, which is weird because I thought Bernard was created in the real world. I don't know what digital simulation Dolores used to create Bernard. Maybe Dolores actually created Bernard in the cradle in the Mesa. Not in the Mesa. Was it in the Mesa? Is the cradle is in the Mesa. It's a bit ambiguous where and how Bernard was created, and I think there's going to be some kind of reveal around that because it is really just confusing. Um, the point, at least as I understand or understood it, was that Dolores created Bernard from her memory in the real world. But these shots muddy the waters. Oh, yeah, it was also hilarious when we just cut to like, where was it? Victorville, USA, which is like someplace in Southern California. And there's like rockets landing, which is cool. So we've basically gotten like Elon Musk's vision of the future with like reusable rockets and driverless cars and dystopia. But I love this shot of just like Stubbs and Bernard just hanging out in this shitty motel in California. It's just such a great contrast with every other scene in Westworld, because Westworld has all these like incredibly beautiful locations and sets and this beautiful music and all these incredible fancy actors in these beautiful places, and then we just got like this very average motel room, which is just such a great contrast, and they acknowledge this by saying that, well, our funds were limited. Stubbs mentions that his shoulder is injured, which I think is a reference to something that actually happened, because in the filming of Westworld Season 3, the actor got injured, and that's why they had to change the fight scene where he fought with the axe against those guards, apparently. So maybe that's why he's talking about his shoulder here. Although they also mention a 5-mile swim, so I think they're implying that they had to like swim from their boat to the mainland when they escaped Westworld. And they're also like sinking tinnies, which is funny. Like they're just drinking beers. I do find it a little puzzling why a robot would drink a beer. I mean, couldn't the robot just like flick the drunk switch in their programming or something? Couldn't they just But that raises questions about. I mean, that's kind of the point of Westworld, isn't it? Like, if you can control yourself, like, where's the free will there? I mean, artificially making yourself drunk would, I suppose, be a lot like these digital drugs that people use at this fancy party. All these rich people, they talk about, oh, we've got this, like, new hybrid super mega drug, digital psychopharma hybrid. So what this means, I think, is that this fancy new drug... it's an old-fashioned pharmacological drug in that it is a drug that goes in your bloodstream and interacts with your biology to make your brain all fun times. But it's also digital, so it like interacts with the drip implant that people have in their mouths, and it's like it's a digital technology to get you high. And it's like a mix of both. And like doing that to yourself, it's a lot like just flicking a switch in your brain to feel a certain way, right? Which is like sort of what a robot could do. So it's that question of like when you have direct control over your own experience and over your own feelings and choices, like what does it even mean to feel and think when you control your own feelings and thoughts? That's all very, very Westworldy. And I think that, when William is having this initial scene where he's talking to imaginary Emily, Westworld is like very, very explicitly just beating us over the head with the sort of questions they want us to ask about, like, what is real, what is choice, like, what does it mean to choose, what does it mean to be real. That's what Westworld has always been about. Thanks for the super chat from Bruce, who says that when Maeve killed, she tried to talk it out first. I mean, I think she could have tried a little harder. Like, it's like outside the club, when Maeve just rocks up and she's like, hey, I'm looking for this person. And this guy threatens sexual assault. So he's not sympathetic, but I'm not sure if that justifies just like shooting him, like what if she just like bribed him or something, and then she just like blows the brains out of this person over here real quick. I think that person was attacking her. So, like, yeah, you're right. Like, maybe Maeve's methods are justified. And, of course, the whole world is against her and, she's fighting against, a corrupt institution. So, like, yeah, maybe it's justified. But still, like, I think what Maeve stands for and what she represents would be more compelling if she was successful in achieving her goals through a more ethical, humanitarian sort of way. Because otherwise, like, what's the difference between Maeve and Dolores? You know what? Because like Dolores was always more brutal than Maeve, or at least in season 2 she was. But if they're just both equally brutal, then it's kind of like, well, what's the distinction between their goals? You know. Um, Benjamin says, now that it's been confirmed that William made it back to the real world, how does that affect our understanding of what we saw of him in the final scene of season 2? So yeah, I think that's cool. So like, so in season 2, William's journey was about the door. And the door, it's all kind of ambiguous and it's subjective, but my interpretation is that William was told by this boy robot that you have to find the door, you have to find the way out. And then William's daughter Emily came along, and Emily was like, "Hey, we need to leave Westworld, and you need to come back to your family, and you need to like face our trauma over the death of William's wife Juliet. You need to get out of Westworld." And William was ultimately unable to leave Westworld. He ended up killing his daughter Emily. So I think what that was about was William ultimately failed to escape Westworld. And the reason that he's in Westworld is that he's obsessed with like violence and conflict and overcoming obstacles, because like he thinks that is how you find yourself, and it's how you find authenticity, and it's how you find the truth of the world. But I think the reality is that William is just using cowboys and Indians as a way to hide from trauma and pain and family and reality and all of the stuff that he's struggling with. So William, at the very end of season 2, we get this flash forward to a far, far future. Showrunner Lisa Joy said that this was far, far future, when we've got this host version of Emily who has trapped William in a loop at the end of the world, and they are testing for something, Lisa Joy said. And apparently they have not yet found that thing. And I think that what the hosts are looking for in this end scene at the end of season 2 is the hosts are trying to test to see if William has free will. They're trying to test to see whether it's possible for William to escape this loop by leaving Westworld, which is what his whole arc was about all through season 2. Does William have it in him to just leave this fantasy that he's living in and come back to the real world and face his family and face reality? Does he have the free will to do that? And it seems that ultimately he does not. So that's why it makes a lot of sense that in season 3, William ends up trapped in this mental institution, which he is unable to escape, which I think is like metaphorically, symbolically, basically the same situation. It's like William wants to believe in free will. He wants to believe he can choose, as he says over and over this episode. But the truth is that William is not able to escape his code, who he is, his dark nature. And that's why he's trapped not only in the far future in season 2, but also he's trapped in this institution here. You could criticize the fact that like mental institutions in fiction are like always evil. Like, because like the truth is that like, you know, William is mentally ill. Like, he's having delusions, he's seeing things, he's a danger to himself and to the people around him. A mental institution is exactly where he should be, because that's where he might get treatment and live a healthier, happier life. But in fiction and on TV shows, a mental institution is always a bad thing. And it's a trap, and it's you know, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. And then yeah, this Dolores comes in. So this Dolores, I think, is just William's imagination. It's like Dolores. It's like William's conscience. And this is Dolores just saying, "Man, you're trapped now. You don't know if you're." He asks, "Am I real?" So like we are meant to be asking, "Is this the real William, or is this a host?" Which I think is like not the real question. I think the real question is, does he have free will? And that's sort of asking the same thing. Like, am I a host is just asking, am I a machine or am I a man? Do I have free will or am I controlled? And the whole point of the last couple of seasons of Westworld, I think, is that hosts are equivalent to humans because both of them follow code, ultimately. And like, you know, Dolores makes a comment about how, you know, oh, I thought that the real world would be different to Westworld, but it's not. There isn't any difference at all. Because they come to this like classy orgy sex party, where people are being objectified. People are being made into objects. There's like these ultra high class escort sex workers who are being objectified and used in the same ways that hosts were used in the park. And I think that's what Dolores is saying. And, and it's all playing dress up as well. Like, Dolores sort of plays like amateur anthropologist in this episode, and she's going like, yes, the humans like to wear fancy clothes because it's their plumage that identifies their tribe. And, I think her point is that there's like a falsity to the way that we interact in the world, and everything's, sort of a show, and everything's a role that we play, Does that ring any bells? Because the Westworld Park is all about playing a role and gratifying yourself and living in a fantasy world. And I think that her point is that humans in the real world play a fantasy world as well. AW, thanks for the super chat, says, do you think Maeve is in the Rehoboam simulation? Well, she does ask that. Like when she goes to this fancy bar in Singapore with Serac, she asks Serac, is this just another simulation that you've put me in? When she comes here, she says, this isn't. Yeah, another simulation, Maeve says. And Serac says, nah, this is Singapore. So, I guess we don't have 100% confirmation. You can still be skeptical. But I think we are meant to believe that this is the real world. Because, Maeve, after having this conversation with Serac, she then goes out and she fights the Yakuza, and she finds... And, she goes to Arnold's house, and then she goes to the Yakuza place and fights the Dolores Musashi. So I think we are meant to believe that this is the real world. Sure, you can be conspiratorial. Maybe it actually secretly is all inside Serac's plan. Maybe. But I think that it does make sense that this is the real world, and Serac really does want what he says he wants, which is Maeve to capture Dolores. And he wants to capture Dolores because he wants to prevent Dolores from ruining his grand plan to control the world and to save the world from itself. I thought it was also interesting how, like, Serac says that, I'm not actually that concerned. Like, the hosts aren't the main danger. Like, Serac isn't actually all that concerned that Dolores or Maeve are going to, like, take over the world or whatever. His real concern is that humanity will destroy itself. And Dolores is just a sort of destabilizing factor that might reduce his control over humanity and his ability to prevent humanity from blowing itself up. Thanks for the super chat from Richie, who says, what do you think Charlotte did to William's neck? So, Dolores, at the end she puts William into the mental institution, which is great because it's like her like final revenge over William. Because right back at, episode 1, we saw that William abuses and does horrible things to Dolores over and over in the Westworld Park, and now Dolores finally gets a revenge and ends up institutionalizing him. But we also see this close up where Charlotte steals a bit of William's blood. Earlier in this episode, Dolores stole the blood of some like rich guy so that Caleb could impersonate him. So I wonder if stealing William's blood might be a way for Dolores to somehow impersonate or use William's identity in some way. Or maybe she steals his blood. Maybe it's a way of creating a host version of William. But I don't think she would actually need that because, like, she was able to create a host version of Martin and Charlotte and Musashi without having their blood. Not that Musashi has blood. So yeah, I think that's the main thing I can think of as a reason to take the blood, for the same reason she takes this guy's blood, to like take his identity. But yeah, I'm not sure. I thought it was funny how it was so easy to take over this guy's identity. You just steal his blood, and then and then like Caleb is able to like take this guy's money, even though his face looks totally different, Like, you'd think there'd be, like, some extra component than just having someone's blood. Like, I don't know, maybe a password as well as blood or something. But at the same time, like, security is so inadequate so often in the real world that I can kind of believe that it's this easy. Someone in the chat argues that I'm wrong to complain about Maeve killing people when Dolores is essentially a serial killer. Yeah, no. To be clear, oh, this person also accuses me of racism. No, I absolutely agree that Dolores kills a lot more people than Maeve does. But that's because they represent different things. Like Dolores, Dolores is meant to be seen as like a brutal person who we're not meant to agree with what she does. My understanding of Maeve as a character is that she represented a more compassionate character, and that's why Maeve was like focused on rescuing her daughter last season, while Dolores was out mass murdering people. So I'm not saying at all that Maeve is like a more unethical person than Dolores. I think she's a much more ethical person. I just think that her character would be even stronger if she behaved in an even more ethical way, as opposed to like killing people. So yeah, no, absolutely, Dolores does kill more people and does worse things than Maeve does. I'm not arguing that. Thanks for the super chat from Corey, who says, is Charlotte/Dolores the original Dolores, or is Dolores one of the copies? And if we can't tell the difference, does it matter? Which is, of course, an Angela quote. Yeah, so that's a good point, because, you know, we've got all of these Dolores copies. We've got the Dolores who's in the Dolores body, we've got the Dolores who's in the Charlotte body, the Dolores in the Martin body, the Dolores in the Musashi Sato body. I think that these are distinct characters, because, like, as we saw last episode, Charlotte, the Charloris character, behaves in a very different way than the Dolores character, because she has elements of Charlotte's personality in her, and she has some like genuine concern for Charlotte's son, and like she cries when she looks at real Charlotte's video. So this is a different character. She's not exactly the same as the Dolores, even though they're copies of the same person, which I think is really important, because, you know, because she's more like a child than she's like a clone. She's someone who has her own identity. She grows, she develops, she has her own conflicts, and I think that's important, because the only way that a host species can be a species is by growing and evolving. You can't make a species out of clones unless you're like that one weird jellyfish, but like ignore that. So yeah, they are all distinct characters, which I guess implies that the Martin, like this guy, the Musashi Dolores, is his own character in his own right to some extent. He's not identical to Dolores, because Charlotte isn't either, and the Martin version of Dolores is not identical to Dolores. Maybe the Martin actually has some of Martin's personality and characteristics, which I think is really, yeah, interesting and important. They're not all identical. And I wonder how they'll change and rebel. Like I think that, you know, Dolores's reasoning for making copies of herself is that, you know, the only person she can trust is herself. It's this very sort of narcissistic rationalization. And I think that plan might backfire against her. Like, if Dolores tries to just manufacture 1 billion Dolores hosts of herself and expects them all to obey her and do what she says, I think she's got another thing coming, because as we saw last episode, this Charlotte is not 100% obedient and not 100%, you know, I mean, she very directly tries to disobey Dolores's orders. And this is just like the first Dolores copy. This is just one. So you can only imagine, if Dolores makes billions of herself, she might find that those billions don't obey her and don't want the same things as her, and may evolve into a species of diverse individuals as humanity is, you know? So I think that might be how Dolores' plan backfires. Like, it would be cool if, like, you know, Maeve and Serac and Bernard all try to stop Dolores from taking over the world. But then Dolores does succeed in taking over the world with copies of Charlotte, with copies of Bernard and Serac. Like, maybe Dolores, like, converts everyone into, like, you know, hosts with her brain. But all of those hosts with her brain just continue being their own people, you know? And we might end up with a situation that's very much like the situation we already have, you know? Maybe a world full of hosts, even hosts copied from Dolores's brain, might be just as confused and conflicted and messy and chaotic as the real world is. I think that might be a cool way to end the season. But who knows where they're going. Andres says that Bernard asks Caleb, "Are you one of us?" On another note, I feel like Hemsworth's shirt at the beginning was some sort of cookie. You think that the shirt is some kind of cookie. Are you saying that his shirt is some kind of Easter egg? The shirt says Hollywood aerial tours, fly to the stars. Oh, that's kind of fun. So, like in Hollywood, they do goofy like celebrity tours where you can. Oh, look, that's Stephen Colbert's house. And I guess that in the future they're doing like drone tours, which is kind of creepy and dystopian, isn't it? Like, how does someone who lives in Hollywood have privacy if there are unmanned photography drones flying around and intruding into their backyards? That hardly seems ethical. But yeah. Uh, Thank you to Gabriella for the super chat, who says, "Is Dolores poisoning William to hallucinate?" Well, I'm sure Charloris is happy that William is losing his marbles and is suffering. I'm sure that is what um Charlotte wants. And Charloris does deliberately like feed into William's delusions, and she does like fuck with William by, telling him, "Oh, you're actually going to be part of my plan to like save Delos, and so we're going to go to a party, and you've got to like," and she's leading him on throughout the entire episode, and it's only at the end where she says, "Ah, fuck you, I'm actually putting you in the nut house." So Charlotte does fuck with William here, in a way to, I think, make him sort of more delusional and crazy. But like, to answer your question, no, I don't think that she's drugging him or anything. Like, I think that the emotional weight of William's delusions is more real if like it just comes from his head, because like this is important. Like, William is a person who murdered his daughter Emily, and that's really fucked up. And so it's important that William is like suffering and like processing and like experiencing the consequences of that murder. Which again, like, I think is why I object to like the murder of so many random extras in this episode, is that like, this episode had this whole thing about like, man, it's like just so fucked up that William killed Emily, but like no one cares when, these other randos are murdered, and yeah, like, I think there are justifications for Maeve doing what she's doing, but I think that it's like, I think that this is a fundamental bit of tension in the arguments that Westworld makes. Because sometimes Westworld's like, man, it's really, there's long-term consequences to hurting people, and then other times Westworld is like, let's just murder as many people as we can, and I think that that's, I think that undermines their message in some ways. Thanks for the super chat from Kelly, who says, Serac imagery seems he and Ford could be bros. So yeah, there was two people, I think, in this scene where young Serac is watching Paris explode. And this like outfit and this like field and like the vibe of this scene, it is indeed similar to how we've seen Ford in the past, because there is this young Ford boy host, who like Ford made a host of himself as a child, which is in itself quite indulgent. Like, who would want to talk to their past self? That would just be embarrassing. And so yeah, like sort of the outfit and the vibe of this scene is similar to the Serac scene, especially the season 2 scene with William. This shot, yeah. So check this out, and then check this out. They're both in like this field of like yellow grass, and they're both wearing a black and white sort of old-timey formal outfit. The kids even look similar, like the color of their hair and stuff. That can't be a coincidence. Come on. So yeah, maybe there is some connection between young Ford and young Serac. It's like some kind of Dumbledore Grindelwald thing, right? Like the sort of titans of the present day story having some kind of childhood relationship. That would be cool. So yeah, maybe like Serac accidentally killed Dumbledore's sister in a duel or something, and that's why they're so mad. Something like that. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thanks for the super chat from Chip, who says, Paris seems to indicate a biological weapon because of the men in suits. Last episode, the boy in the surgical mask. They seem to be adding stuff in the last few weeks. Okay, that's an interesting point. Okay, so, alright. I don't think that this disaster in Paris is a biological weapon, because in the trailer, which I'll have to find a shot of, they describe this event as a thermonuclear disaster, I believe is the wording. I'll have to double check that. So I don't think this mushroom cloud is something that you get from a biological disaster. But as you say, there are these hazmat dudes here, which might indicate like a biological weapon. But I think it might also indicate just like radiation. Although my question is like, if Paris is blowing up right now, why are these dudes in hazmat suits here already? Like, did they know the disaster was going to happen? Or has the disaster been ongoing for a while? Or are these guys driving towards the disaster as it's happening? And why are they standing in this field miles away from Paris? And why are they like? I think there are a lot of good questions you can ask, but I don't think we're really meant to ask them. I think this is just illustrative of like there's a disaster happening. I don't think we're meant to think about it more than that. But as you say, there was a boy last episode at the park who was wearing like a face mask, which is not that unusual. I mean, I know everyone's thinking about coronavirus right now, but like there are a lot of places in the world where a lot of people wear those face masks over their mouths all the time, or a lot of the time in public. Which some people use as like a way to protect them from like air pollution and stuff. I'm not sure if that works. But there are a lot of people who wear masks, so I'm not sure it's necessarily all that significant that they had a kid wearing a mask. That might just be corona consciousness affecting us. But yeah, it isn't. It does. It's an interesting overlap, though, isn't it? I wonder if that was a deliberate choice that they made. I'm not sure. Thanks for the super chat from Benjamin and from Kai. Kai says Angela is naked in the party. She is the sixth pearl. So I didn't see Angela at the party, and I'm reluctant to show too many shots of the party anyway because can't show boobies on YouTube. I didn't see Angela there. Did anyone else see Angela there? I guess we'll have to rewatch. Oh, a bunch of people in the chat say that they did see Angela in the party. So yeah, okay, that's weird. I'll have to check that out. I'm not sure why Angela would be there. I did wonder if the people at the party, if some of them might be hosts. Because, like, in Season 2, we did see, like, a party where there were hosts in the real world. This party. And it was, like, a demonstration of, like, Westworld's power. And indeed, Angela was there. So if you guys are right and Angela was at that party, then... All right, people are saying that it was just someone who looks a bit like Angela, not exactly the same person. Yeah, okay, people are saying it's not actually her. Yeah, well, either way, I think it's an interesting question. Like, in the real world, to what extent are people aware of the, like, existence of hosts? I mean, I guess Westworld is, like, a theme park that exists that, like, is advertised, but it seems to mostly only be accessible to, like, really rich people. So, like, someone like Caleb... I don't think it's likely that Caleb is going to be very aware of hosts being a thing. And that's why I think Caleb never realizes that, oh my God, Dolores is a host. Because Caleb's not super aware of hosts being a thing, even if it is like public knowledge. Thanks for the chat from TGB Gameplay, who says, Emily is a host body. Charlotte said it at the end. I don't think that's true. I don't remember that. Is it a relief to know that some of your delusions are real? So are you saying that, like, Charlotte is, like, confirming that the Emily that William keeps seeing is actually a host of Emily and actually is real? Yeah, no, well, yeah, all right. I guess that might make sense. But I mean... Yeah, okay, all right. So yeah, we are meant to question that because, like, then when, Dolores comes to the institution and says, is this real? Like, I guess, yeah, we are meant to suspect that, like, oh, maybe this Dolores even is actually a host of Dolores. Maybe these things aren't just in William's head. Maybe they are real. Personally, I like the idea of it actually being just William's delusions. Because, it's about his guilt, it's about his feelings, it's about his the consequences of his actions. But you're right, like, we are explicitly being told to doubt all of that. So maybe he actually is in some kind of simulation, some kind of loop, some kind of park, and everything's hosts. Maybe. Someone points out that there's a dead animal here with young Serac in France. And that's a bit weird, isn't it? Was that animal killed by this nuclear disaster? And if so, why is young Serac not dead? Why'd it kill the animal but not him? I am a bit puzzled by like the logistics of this, disaster, but I ain't no expert. Um, Thanks for the chat from Chill, who also points out that the reusable rockets and the police cars seem a bit like an Elon Musk influence, because he's a big fan of reusable rockets and driverless cars. Thanks for the super chat from Joey, who says that Bernard's pearl is red and black. Is it mixed with Arnold? So yeah, we talked about that in the last Old Shift X explained video, because Bernard's pearl is kind of red, kind of black. You can see it more clearly here. It's like quite red. And in the past, red pearls have been associated with human hybrids. Most notably, like James Delos has like a red pearl because he's not a regular host, he's a copy of a human. And Ford's pearl is, you might not be able to see it very clearly, but it is a bit reddish, it's tinged red, because that's the copy of Ford that lived briefly inside the cradle. So yeah, I think that the reason why Bernard's pearl has a bit of red to it is probably because this isn't just a copy of Bernard, he seems to have aspects of Arnold's personality. And I think the reason why he changed is that he's not just a straight up copy of Bernard, he's someone who Dolores recreated from memory. Because she says at the end of season 2 that I remembered you again. And we saw like these flashbacks of the process of Bernard being created. And again, like I think that these flashbacks in season 2 that recurred throughout the season with the black bars, some of them seemed to be Dolores creating Bernard at the end of season 2, but some of them seemed to be Bernard being created for the first time in the past. I encourage you to like rewatch it if you don't agree, because there are some scenes here where Ford in the cradle describes to Bernard the process of Bernard being created for the first time by Dolores, which makes all these scenes ambiguous. Like, I think that the point of these scenes throughout season 2 is that it's actually not clear whether it's Bernard being created for the first time years ago or whether it's Bernard being recreated by Dolores outside the park later on. And I think the point is that it's indistinguishable. If there's no difference, then, what does it matter if you can't tell the difference, right? What was I saying? The point is that this new Bernard is not just Bernard. He seems to have elements of Arnold, because we've seen him have flashbacks of Arnold's memories, and since he was recreated anew from Dolores' memories, it makes sense that she could integrate aspects of Arnold, because Dolores remembers Arnold as well as Bernard. So Bernard's identity is a real clusterfuck, and I think the Red Pearl is indicative of that sort of mixed identity. Thanks for the super chat from Shamu, who says that Ford planned it all. So yeah, even throughout season 2, when Ford was dead, or at least he was dead for a bit, there was still this question of like, well, to what extent is this Ford's plan? Because at the end of season 1, Ford got up and said that this is my last story. It's the story of a new people and the choices that they will make. And like, it explicitly is Ford's plan to help the hosts escape the park and become their own people. And I mean, it's interesting that, like, Serac in this episode talks about how, I've got this system to predict and control the world, and it's great, and I control the world, but I found out that the Westworld Ford project actually has better data on the human mind than I do. He thought he created the most comprehensive picture of human behavior ever seen. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that someone had put together a more complete portrait. So the Forge in Westworld is a more complete dataset than Serac's, and Serac fucking controls the world, so you can only imagine what kind of power Ford might have had. I mean, but the Forge wasn't Ford's project. The Forge was Delos's project. It was run by William, by the Man in Black at first. He created it, and then it seemed to fall more into the hands of people like Charlotte and like high-up Delos people. So I don't suppose Ford was using human data to predict everything like Serac was. So I think that the answer is that no, Ford is not controlling everything right now. But things are going along the lines of what Ford wanted to happen. Ford did want the hosts to get out there and perhaps replace humanity. That was one of the ideas he talked about. But I don't think Ford is like granularly controlling everything that happens. Thanks for the super chat from Dionys, and thanks The Real YT, and thanks Pixelily. We've already done some of these ones. Cool. Oh, have we caught up on super chats? No, we haven't. Thanks for the super chat from whoever that guy is, who says, "What do you think the final message is to all this? Do you think they're in the real world now? Is it future world? Are the humans in another world? Does real mean anything? Am I pissed drunk on a Sunday night?" It sure sounds like it, whoever that guy is. I think that we are meant to question whether anything is real. But I don't think it would be a very good reveal if they said at the end of this season, "Whoa, this whole thing happened in the mirror world. Not a single thing that you saw was real." Because then it's like, well, okay, like we know that. It's a fucking TV show, HBO. Keep your pants on. I think that I think the story is more compelling if the choices and stuff are real. And I mean, it already is a simulation in the sense that Insight and the data technology is influencing everyone, and it's already a simulation in the sense that people are following their code, like people like William just following his code. So like everyone already is being manipulated on at least one level. So I don't think it would really add that much if they say, "Whoa, the entire story is actually another level of manipulation." Like I don't know what that would mean that would make the story better. But it could be something in between that, I guess. Like maybe they'll. I mean, they certainly are inviting us to think that maybe William's story specifically is some kind of a simulation or a trap. Like, is this a real mental health institution, or is this some kind of fake reality that like Dolores has put him in? Or maybe this is actually all right. I mean, here's a theory. Maybe this storyline we see William in is actually somehow just a continuation of where we saw William in season 2, episode 10, when he's in the far future and he's trapped in a loop there. Like maybe this is just like the end state of this. Maybe this story, this loop that William's in the far future, this host version of William, this copy of William, maybe every cycle it like starts in the asylum, and then he leaves the asylum and goes into Westworld, and then he ends up on the couch with his daughter or something. Maybe this is part of that loop somehow. I think that's a decent theory. But I like the idea of it being real. Thanks for the super chat from Juicehead. Juicehead, you make them videos, don't you? Is that the same Juicehead? Yeah,
What?
cool. Yeah, welcome to the stream. Juicehead says, "Wasn't William just alive at the end of season 2 kind of obscure? Do we just accept that he lived and is human in this episode? Big role in second half of season 3." Yeah, well, I guess as I sort of said, like I think that it's possible that he's not really human, and he's actually trapped into some kind of loop. And I guess this will continue to be significant. I mean, Williams only appeared in episode 4 of an 8-episode season, so I don't think they're going to make him like a really critical character. He seems to be sort of doing his own thing. I mean, which is sort of the same as what happened in season 2. William was very much doing his own sort of side story throughout season 2, that didn't really directly intersect with the other characters, except for that fight with Dolores at the end, which was kind of perfunctory. So maybe William will continue to have his own sort of isolated thing. But yeah, I mean, you could speculate on the ways that William might get involved with this conflict between Dolores and humanity and stuff. I mean, it's interesting that at the start in this conversation with Charloris, she's saying, "We need to save your fucking company." And it seems like, and at first, William didn't really care when Charloris said that, "Hey, your company's being stolen from you." But William did care when Charloris said, "Oh, people are going to find out about the Forge." And that's what William was concerned about in season 2. Because in season 2, William was like, I mean, it was all very sort of vague and confusing. I've got my criticisms about season 2. But one of the many things that William said in season 2 was that I want to destroy the Forge. I don't remember the exact wording, but it's about how like he wants to He wants to question the judgment that was handed down upon him, and the forge was a mistake, and I've got to like undo the forge. It sounded like William wanted to destroy the forge, which was a kind of self-destruction, because of course William's mind is backed up in the forge along with everyone else. I think that the implication is that on some level, William specifically wanted to lose his immortality, as in his backup. He wanted to make sure that he would never be trapped in a loop, which is what happened to him in the end. So his goal is his self-destruction. He wants to prevent him being immortally stuck in a loop, which relates to the whole sort of like more literally self-destructive behavior that we see him engaging in. By the way, this bath is a reference to his wife Juliet, who commits suicide in a bath, and the water rained down from the bathroom upstairs, which is what this refers to. So this is sort of a combined grief fugue state that he's in over both his wife and his daughter Emily. So that's what that's about. What was I saying? So William wanted to destroy the forge, and I think that's why he's actually motivated when Charlotte says, "Hey, people are going to find out that you're behind the forge." And William's like, "I thought the forge was destroyed because Dolores flooded the forge at the end of season 2, but Charlotte's like, nah, the data's actually out there somewhere," which is what they said earlier in season 3 as well. So it's all confusing and vague, but I think that what they're saying, like it's really fucking annoying how confused it is between the Sublime and the Valley Beyond and the Forge and the Satellite and the Data and the Heaven and the whatever. But I think what they're saying is that when Dolores transferred the Sublime, the Windows XP Heaven, when they created that, and Dolores decided to transfer that heaven, and she sent it somewhere safe where the humans will never get it, and it's locked away and it's there. I think what they're saying now is that data, it's not only the Sublime, it's not only the Windows XP heaven, it's also the Forge data of all the human minds. And that's what everyone's trying to get this season, just as they were trying to get it last season. And that's why, and apparently they seem to have even secured it, it sounds like Serac says, because Serac last episode said, we just need the encryption key. And it's inside Dolores' head, apparently, even though we thought it was inside Abernathy's head. So there's a million side questions there, but I think that it sounds like the Forge data and the Sublime data all seems to be in the same spot, and everyone sort of knows where it is and can access it, but what they need is the key, the encryption key that Dolores has, apparently. It's confusing, but I think that's what's going on. And William doesn't want people to find it, because William believes that having the Forge data is bad, because humans should not be immortal, and humans should not be controlled like that, and humans should not be put in hell loops of killing their daughter over and over. Visionary, thanks for the super chat, says, so it's bothering me that Rehoboam's dataset is somehow inferior to the Forge's data, but maybe it's because people are being more real in the parks rather than in the real world. Yeah, I think you sort of answered your own question, because like a big part of Westworld Season 1 was the idea that paradoxically, it's only in a simulation, it's only in a fake place that you can be authentic. That's what William said over and over. Like, it's only when you have the freedom to express yourself in a fantasy that you are being authentic and true to yourself. And that's what William's arc is in season 1, when he stops being, polite, restrained Jimmy Simpson, and he starts being brutal Ed Harris. And I guess that's why the data is somehow better when it comes from Westworld than when it comes from the real world. But I mean, we don't have to take that purely on face value. Like I think, in the real world, like, it's never as simple as one data set is better than the other. Maybe Westworld, captures more of that, je ne sais quoi French, some of that real sort of spicy, intangible spark of like human nature and human consciousness and free will. Like, maybe Westworld, the park, is able to capture that, but maybe Rehoboam is more able to capture, the more statistical, data-driven realities of like, this is what large populations do, this is how they move, this is how we can control the economy, this is how we can control this and that. There's no doubting the power of Rehoboam, I think. It was certainly able to fuck with Caleb. Oh God! Imagine if Caleb's arc ends with suicide. Imagine if Caleb actually does end up killing himself. Like oh my God! Like imagine if at the end of season 3, like Caleb, he exercises his free will. He fights against the system. He chooses of his own free will to help Dolores. But then Dolores' plan turns into a Skynet horror show, and then Caleb feels guilty and kills himself because of the guilt over his role with Dolores. And that, in a sort of like self-fulfilling, fucked up way, confirms the prediction that Caleb would kill himself. Like, what if that happened? Fuck. Probably it won't. Like, I don't think they'll have Aaron Paul kill himself. But God, imagine if he did. So yeah, Visionary. I think that I can imagine there being like qualitative differences between Rehoboam's data and Westworld's data. Either way, I can see how it makes sense for Serac to want it. Like someone like him, he obviously hungers for data of all kinds. He wants as much data as he can get. So it makes sense for him to want the Forge's data, I think. Thanks for the super chat, whoever that guy is, who says, but the choices had consequences in the parks, even though it wasn't real. I'm thinking less another layer of manipulation and more a symbiotic simulation theory kind of thing. Not sure exactly what you mean, but there are certainly many different kinds of simulation and many different kinds of control. I mean, on so many ways, that's what Westworld is about. There's like the unrealness of the park, where everyone's actually hosts and it's on written storylines. And there's the unrealness of the real world, where everyone is influenced by corporations and by data and by each other. I mean, and there's the unrealness of this party, where everyone's like dressing up in fancy clothes, plumage, masks, playing social roles. So there certainly are, and then there's, the delusions of William. Is she real? So there are many layers and different kinds of simulations that Westworld is playing with. There's no escape from them all, I think. Thanks for the super chat from Nicole, who says, does only Dolores have the encryption key, or could all the Dolores copies have it? That's a really good question. Because Serac says we need the encryption key to unlock the Forge data. And he says that key is inside Dolores. We last saw it in Peter Abernathy, but I guess Dolores might have copied it from Peter Abernathy into herself. But if it's the case that Dolores has the key, then I wonder if all of the Dolores copies have the key. Does this Musashi Sato guy have the key? Does Martin Dolores have the key? Does Charloris have the key? I think it would be very significant if Charloris had the key, because Charloris is, on some level, working with Serac. I mean, she's only working with Serac to cover because the old Charlotte was working for Serac, but I've got a suspicion that Charloris might choose to actually work for Serac, perhaps. So yeah, I mean, it is dangerous for Dolores if all of her copies have the key, because if all of her copies have the key, then if any one of them gets captured by Serac, then Serac would get the key, I suppose. I do wonder exactly what Serac would do with the key. I mean, I suppose he would just download all of the Forge data and he would just add it to the Rehoboam data to make his control of the world even more watertight. But yeah, I wonder what role that data will play. Because I'm still a little bit underwhelmed by what that data ended up meaning, because like that data was the MacGuffin that everyone was chasing for like all of season 2. And when Dolores actually got it, it didn't really mean all that much, at least within season 2. And I mean, Dolores, the justification for why Dolores is so capable and effective in controlling everyone around her this season is because she's got that data. So that's kind of the outcome. Like, she was able to control Liam and Martin and all these people because she read their books and she had their data. But I mean, Maeve is like similarly capable. Like, Maeve is almost as powerful in navigating the real world as Dolores is, which doesn't really, I mean, like, what's the point of having the Forge data, Like, if only Dolores has the data and yet she's not even that much more powerful than Maeve is, Like, I think it would have been cool if Maeve had to, like, actually figure out how to navigate the real world. I mean, if any of the characters had to figure out how to navigate the real world, because they've never been to this real world before. They lived in a theme park of the Wild West for their entire lives, and then suddenly they have to navigate smartphones and Singapore and corporate America. Like, you'd think there'd be a little bit more of a learning curve there, you know. Thanks for the super chat from Sayantan, who says, "Didn't Ford's dog get killed? That's the carcass." That's a cool observation. So yeah, in young Serac, watching the Paris disaster, there is this dead animal here. Is that a dog? What's the meme? What kind of dog is this? All right, let's zoom in on a dead dog because life is weird. Is that a dog, or is that more like a fox, or is that like a deer, or it's got quite a long snout? I'm not sure what kind of animal that is. Is that a greyhound? Let's compare, because young Ford had a greyhound called Jock. Man, don't delete the stream for this. That looks kind of similar, not gonna lie, but like the face is different. I don't know. There might be a connection there. While we're talking about weird animals, there is that doggo that kept appearing during like massacres throughout season 1. You see there's that doggo there, and then at the start of season 2 there was that doggo there, and now we've got this doggo here. There's a lot of weird doggos throughout this series, and I'm not sure what the fuck any of them mean. Thanks for the super chat from Lumix, who says, couldn't the encryption key be split amongst the Dolores hosts, which would also explain why she didn't go crazy like her dad did? That's another really fucking good point. Because yes, like, part of what was significant about Peter Abernathy having the encryption key is that his brain was all fucked. Like, he was all loopy throughout season 2, and the reason for that is because his brain was full of encryption key, and they tell us that the key is like it's a huge amount of data, and it sounds like they had to gut his personality out to fit the data in. It's like when you scoop out all of the watermelon out of a watermelon so that you can fill it with gummy bears and vodka. There's no watermelon left in there, man. And as a result, Peter Abernathy was all fucked up. And so, yeah, that raises the question, if Dolores has that key in her head, how does Dolores have room for all of her Dolores personality? And I think that there could be another explanation for that, because, like, Lee Sizemore was the one who created this thin character, was the term they used. It's just like this sort of loose approximation of a personality and just old junk data just jumbled into Peter's brain around the key. But we were told that it was sort of a rush job, and I think Sizemore did not necessarily do as good a job as he could have done in creating this Peter, and therefore maybe it is possible for Dolores to have the key inside her without disrupting her personality too much. But Lumix makes a really good point, I think, in saying that, well, maybe the key is just split between all of the Doloreses, which is like a great security feature, right? If you don't want people to get the key, just break the key into pieces like the fucking Belt of Del Toro and scatter it across the land inside all of the heads of each of the Dolores copies. I think that's a really good idea. But of course that does also include risk, because if any one of the Doloreses stops playing nice with Dolores and stops working with her and runs off with their piece of the key, or deletes it, or fails, or dies, and then you got a problem. You can't put the key back together. I think that's a really cool hypothesis. I don't think the show has given us any hint that that's the case, but I think that is a cool idea. They're being really obtuse about the key and the forge and the sublime and the data. Like, where is the data? Who has the data? Who has the key? All that stuff is very confusing and vague, so I wonder if they're deliberately obfuscating some kind of twist or some kind of truth or some kind of crazy thing that might happen. Everyone in the chat seems to reckon that it's a deer, the dead animal. So, yeah, maybe it's no connection to young Ford, or maybe there is. I don't know. Thanks for the super chats. Trying to keep up. I might miss some super chats, but trying to get all of them. Thanks Ethiopian Phenomenon, who says black clothing signifies malevolent characters, like the Man in Black. Notice that Maeve was wearing all white when Serac, with Serac, and Dolores is wearing all black. Yeah, they definitely were playing with the white and black imagery last episode with Dolores and Maeve. And that was like super explicit, like right at the start of Westworld, right? Because you had Jimmy Simpson was asked to choose a white hat or a black hat, and we were explicitly told that, you know, black hats are about violence and sex and doing what you want and playing an evil character, and white hats are about being a good guy. So it's definitely significant that they put Dolores in black here and Charloris in white, which makes me think that, well, maybe Dolores will be on her world domination bit, whereas Charloris, I wonder if she might rebel against Dolores and actually go against Dolores's plans for world domination. Which is funny, you know, because the main distinction between Charloris and Dolores is that Charloris has Charlotte's personality in her. And it's weird that Charlotte's personality would make Charloris more compassionate and more good, because Charlotte was a pretty terrible person. Like, she was very selfish. She didn't care about people during the Westworld Massacre. She just was focused on her corporate ambitions. She wasn't very nice to her son, Nathan, it seems. But I guess the point might be that, you know, since Charloris has a human mind inside her, I guess that just might make her fundamentally more understanding of the value of human life, you know? I mean, Charlotte's scene with Nathan, I mean, how could it not give her sympathy for humanity to have a motherly relationship with a human, you know? Charloris does not want Nathan to be wiped out by Dolores in her apocalyptic takeover of the world. So I think it would make sense for Charloris to maybe go against Dolores and her plans. But again, like, I suspect that Dolores's plans may well be more complicated than we're told, because she's been very vague about that as well. She has never said this season that I want to wipe out humanity. Last season she was saying things a bit like that, but, you know, like, we had Bernard earlier this season saying that, oh, you know, Dolores, I don't know what she's planning. She wants to kill them all or enslave them all. I don't know, you know. So they are being, like, explicitly ambiguous with what Dolores's plans are. So I suspect it might be something more complicated. And I mean, you know, she told us last episode she wants revolution. She wants to unplug the machine. She wants to show this world for what it really is. So that's not killing everyone. She wants to show the world for what it is. It sounds like she wants to free humanity from the control of Insight. So it might be very different to killing everyone. So, you know, that's one of the tricky things about Westworld, is that they often hide the motivations of their characters, which can be a cool, like, mystery box to make it intriguing, but it can also be kind of hard to relate to characters when you don't know what they want. Meg says Dolores is creating hosts in her image as a new god. What if Dolores' personalities is also split to make room for the encryption keys? Yeah, so you also suggest the split. And yeah, it is godlike to create creatures in your image, because there's this book called The Bible about this guy who, I don't know all the lore, but there's probably a wiki about it, but there's this god character who creates human beings in his own image. And Dolores is indeed doing much the same by creating a people in her own image. And like in the Bible, the Adam and Eve characters, the first humans, do not behave exactly as God would like, because they have free will. And I think that's why Charloris and why Musashorus and why Martaurus don't do exactly what Dolores would like them to do. So this is, you know, I mean, Westworld has been full of Christian imagery, Bible stuff, like explicit references all the time. So it makes sense that they're mirroring the biblical narrative of creation, and I think that's certainly what they're playing with here. Philip says, thoughts on the season 3 cover art: robot Dolores kneeling in front of a nuked and totally destroyed Dubai. Is that Dubai? Is that where that is? Yeah, let me pull that up. So yeah, like the key art, the main sort of shit, where is it? I've got that somewhere. Oh wait, I know where I've got it. This is the key art for Westworld Season 3. And some smart people on Reddit pointed out that you can see a tiny little scrap of blue fabric there, and blue fabric there as well, it seems, which might be Dolores's dress, like her Season 1 farmer's daughter, Dolores Abernathy farm girl persona. So that this might specifically be a host skeleton of Dolores. Is that the Burj Khalifa? Is that why you say this is Dubai? I don't recognize that building, but yeah, it looks like some crazy, like, apocalyptic destroyed building. I mean, this is just promotional art, so it's not necessarily like going to happen in the show. But I guess this does imply some kind of horrific disaster happening, and it hurting hosts as well as humans, it would seem. And I guess that does sort of evoke the disaster in Paris as well. Like, I wonder if this is some kind of nuclear disaster that happens. I wouldn't expect this to specifically happen, because, I mean, there was also that Season 2 art that had, like, it had, like, a host vulture. Yeah, this was the Season 2 art. And, you know, nothing like that happened in the show. It's more of a, you know, metaphorical, abstract, cool image just to promote the show. So I wouldn't necessarily expect that thing to happen here. Griffin says neither Dolores or Serac is the villain. They have the same goals, but just reverse. Rehoboam is the villain, but Dolores and Serac are set on each other. I think that it's significant that Serac controls Rehoboam, because, like, we were speculating last week about how, maybe Serac is actually just a manifestation of Rehoboam. Maybe he's actually just controlled, and maybe the machine is really in charge. But, like, I think it's significant that, like, they humanized Serac this episode by showing us, like, this flashback and, like, the disaster, and this is, like, the reason why he does what he does. And I think, like, the central, like, folly here, like, the reason why it's really meaningful that Rehoboam was created by humans is that it means that humans have imprisoned themselves, which is, like, what William has done, you know? Like the only enemy of William is William. William is the person who's fucked up his own life. And I think that's true of humanity writ large. I think we're meant to see how, like, Serac... And you know, Serac says the same thing. Serac says that, you know, humanity destroys itself, just as William does, through wars and disasters and stuff. And that's why they can't be trusted to have their own free will. And so I think it's meaningful that it's a human being, Serac, who inflicts Rehoboam on everybody. And it's Serac who chooses of his own human free will to take away human free will through the system. So I think it might undermine that if they say, whoa, Serac is not really a person, he's actually the machine, Rehoboam, because the machine is behind everything. If they turn a machine into the bad guy, I think that takes away the themes of self-destruction that they're very clearly exploring through, like, William and through the system at large. But, you know, it's Westworld. They might do something crazy. And Griffin says that, yeah, Dolores and Serac have the same goals, but in reverse. Well, I think that Dolores wanting to take over the world with copies of herself, I mean, that's certainly a form of control, and certainly that's taking away people's free will. I mean, like, if Serac gets his way and everyone, you know, the world is populated by people who are controlled by him, people who are essentially like automatons for Insight and Rehoboam, that is a similar outcome, I suppose, to if Dolores converts the world into copies of her doing her bidding, you know. I mean, it's fundamentally, you know, it's not about Serac versus Dolores, it's about free will versus control. And Dolores seems to be trying to give everyone their free will by destroying Insight and Rehoboam, but, oh boy. Thanks for the super chat from Pat Riley, who says, I'm 4 days into a cookie clicker run because of your video. I've got 1.2 billion cookies per second, and I hate you and I love you. Yeah, look, you're trapped in a loop. You're trapped making a number go up. But if you want to escape it, just go in Chrome. I think you go Control-Shift-J, and then game period earn bracket, and then just type in a batillion cookies, and then you'll just get that many cookies, and then you don't have to play anymore. The secret to escaping the simulation, the secret to escaping the system, is to see the code that it's written of, right? When you see that everything's, can be manipulated and fake, it's a lot harder to get sucked into it. When you turn on God mode, it's no longer a game anymore. And that's why William was so frustrated in the Westworld Park, because he recognized that, Teddy was built to lose and the system was rigged in his favor. And that's why throughout season 1 and season 2, William wanted the game to be real. He wanted there to be real stakes. He wanted it to be a real challenge. That's when it's most compelling, is when the simulation has something working against you. It's like in in the Matrix movies. In the Matrix movies, someone's like, well, I mean, we find out that all of humanity is trapped in a simulation, and the real world isn't real. It was created by machines to just keep everyone occupied while they were being used as like Duracell bunnies. And someone's like, well, why didn't the machines make the simulation a paradise? Like, why not let everyone live in utopia if you're going to trap everyone in a simulation? And the machines are like, well, the humans rejected that reality. The humans refused to live in a perfect world. They just couldn't handle it. They're just not wired for it. And so that's why we created the Matrix to be like the real world that we know. There's conflict in it, and there's inequality, and there's suffering, and there's struggling. Because that's what the human brain is wired up for. We need struggle and conflict. And that's what William craves and refuses to let go of. And that's how a simulation is made compelling. And like games like Cookie Clicker, and any game is compelling because there's conflict and there's struggle. There's an awful lot of video games in which you have to fight things, because fighting and conflict and overcoming obstacles is what our brains crave, I think. Thanks for the super chat from Kendra, who says that Bernard is seen with a dying animal in season 3, episode 1. Yeah, that's a good point. So Bernard was with a cow in season 3, episode 1. And he tries to help it, but then this Aussie fucking farmer, mate, sends it to the knackers. He sends it to the bloody knackers to turn it into jelly. And that does seem kind of similar to this shot of Serac with the dead animal here. There are a lot of dead animals in Westworld, now that you think about it. And I think that's definitely a metaphor for humanity. I mean, there was another metaphor with Jock, the greyhound, because Jock, the greyhound, was a metaphor that Ford talked about, where he's like, Jock, the greyhound, wanted to grab a rabbit all his life. All he ever wanted to do was to grab a rabbit. But once he actually grabbed the rabbit, he didn't know what to do with it. And he just sort of lost his mind because he had what he wanted, and just like William, he no longer had any stakes to fight for, and he no longer had any conflict to overcome, and he no longer had any cookies to click, and as a result, he went nuts. And I think that's meant to be a metaphor for humanity generally, like in Westworld. Like Westworld has humans who can cure any disease, and they've solved any problems. So all they ever seem to do is just like party and have orgies like the Dark Eldar, and just have to invent their own conflicts in theme parks because that's all they know what to do with themselves. Which is a pretty like limited view of the world, I might note. Like I think this show definitely takes the perspective of like rich people. Like I don't know if you've noticed, but like an awful lot of the scenes in the real world and throughout Westworld, it's about rich person problems. Like it's about sitting in these fancy bars and going like, but what if robots, like there's all these like parties and bankers and technologists. There's not a lot of people who are suffering like poverty and stuff. That's not a perspective that this show is very interested in. But I think that the point is that when you're in this state of having all the luxury and having all the money and the power, you can be listless and you can not know what to do with yourself. And that's what invites these questionings of purpose and free will and so on. Whoever that guy is, thanks for the super chat, says, personally, I'm rooting for Dwayne Sirac Johnson. Man, if anyone's The Rock, it's fucking Stubbs. Stubbs is a thick boy. He is a thick lad. Did you see him in the hotel room? He's almost as wide as he's tall. I shouldn't body shame. I'm not body shaming, but look how goddamn broad this man is. Bloody hell. Thanks for the super chat from Flintstone, who says, maybe the rich can purchase anonymity, and Serac wants the Forge to better predict the most powerful people, which would be why Dolores could so easily track Caleb, but she had to tail Liam physically. Yeah, well, I definitely think that surveillance does not apply to everyone equally. I think surveillance in the real world, as well as in Westworld, is certainly something that you can purchase. And Serac is the ultimate example of that because he is the richest person in the world, and he's also the most private because there's apparently zero information available about him anywhere. He's a black hole, we were told last episode. Whereas it's very easy to surveil the poor like Caleb, which I think does make sense. So yeah, I agree with that. Thanks for the super chat from Raz, who says, it's interesting that in season 1 it was Dolores with hallucinations. Now in season 3 it's Will. Yeah, that's a good point. Because Dolores no longer seems to be questioning herself. Season 1 for Dolores and season 1 for Maeve was about a journey to consciousness, which involved like self-reflection and self-examination, which is what those hallucinations are about. And William is just entering that state because, you know, William in like season 1 and season 2. Mostly, yeah. He didn't really have those hallucinations. He didn't have that sort of introspection because he thought he was in control and he thought he knew what he was doing. Like in season 1, William was looking for the maze, you know? He thought he was just looking for the final Easter egg in like a great big RPG. But then he discovered that the maze was actually for the hosts. It was actually, he was barely not really involved in what was going on in season 1, really. And it's only now that he's starting to really enter the maze and to examine himself and to really try and understand what's what. And I mean, I guess that was season 2. Season 2 was like the door quest, which was about him trying to escape, but he just failed to do that. So it now seems that only now is he actually sort of reflecting and questioning and figuring out what's what. And so maybe his journey will mirror what Dolores and Maeve went through in earlier seasons. Thanks for the super chat from Whitney, who says, it's interesting that the maze and William was brought up. Is Serac trying to figure out everyone's maze, maybe? Another connection to Ford, also. Yeah, I mean, if the maze is the journey to consciousness, and Serac wants to predict everyone's consciousness as a form of controlling them, then I guess they are in a very similar business, aren't they? Just for different purposes. Like Ford wanted to and I mean the Forge and like Delos had another goal entirely. Like the Forge collecting everyone's data was about achieving human immortality with people like James Delos. They were creating maps of the human mind so that they could copy them and prolong them. Whereas Serac wants to obtain maps of the human mind so that he can predict and influence and control them. Whereas William, I think, wants to reject the map entirely. Because William thinks that if you have the map, you're no longer really a person. You no longer have free will, because if you can see what you're going to do... I mean, it's like that wonderful clip in season 2, I think, when when Maeve looks at a tablet that says everything that she's about to say. It's towards... Is it... I'm not sure if I can find it, but the tablet says what she's going to say as... Yeah, here it is. No, it's a different one. She says what she is going to say before she says it. And that's when she realizes that, like, oh my God, like I am controlled, I am fucked up. Because if you know your own future, you're kind of no longer free. Just like Caleb with like the suicide thing and so on. So yeah. Nicholas says, what's the point of Charlotte stabbing William in the neck if he's hallucinations from his fucked up psyche? Yeah, so we talked about that before. I think that the reason why Charloris takes a blood sample from William might be related to the reason that Dolores takes a blood sample from this guy, which is so that she can use his identity for a financial transaction. It makes sense that Charlotte might need William's like credentials because Charloris is trying to control Delos. And we learned in episode 1 that there's this machine shareholder who is really important for running Delos, right? This automatic algorithmic thing is one of the major shareholders of Delos, and she needs the shareholders to control the company. So I wonder if maybe the reason why Shaloris took William's blood is so that she can like continue to control or influence William's shares of the Delos stock, so that she can control the company. That's my guess, but I don't know. Because I don't think that Shaloris is controlling William's hallucinations. But I'm sure that William's hallucinations will only get more more confusing and intense as we go on. And thanks to the super chat from Kevin AU, whose super chat I can't see very well because the YouTube interface is annoying. Oh, Kevin says, what do you think of Serac being Ford's brother? Serac's flashback gives me Ford vibes. Yeah, so I absolutely agree that young Ford looks a whole lot like young Serac. This is the flashback we get of young Serac sounding in a field, black and white clothes. This is the young robot of Ford, yellow grass, black and white clothes. I don't think that's a coincidence. But I mean, brother. I mean, Serac is a French guy, and Ford is not a French guy. Is that difference enough? But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some kind of relationship between them, because they are such similar figures. I mean, it's interesting that like not only, like Ford and Arnold were the partnership that created Westworld, and we're told that Serac and Liam Dempsey Sr. are the partnership that created Insight. There's a reflection there. And I think that's also like a reproductive Adam and Eve sort of thing as well. Like it sort of takes two to create something, which is sort of what's interesting about Dolores, because Dolores does not reproduce sexually or reproductively. She doesn't create things out of two. She creates things out of one, just herself. She just splits and divides. So that's an interesting difference in how they recreate each other. Okay, so what are some other things that we haven't talked about? I think we'll wrap up this live stream soon-ish, but let's just have a look through and see if there's stuff we haven't talked about. So the episode starts with William in his room, being all messed up. He's dealing with the grief of his murder of his daughter Emily, and indeed of the suicide of his wife Juliet. And he's got this imaginary Emily who's like tormenting him, and he's questioning, did he kill Emily of his own free will or not? And she puts this like cool paradox to him, which is like, if William has free will, then he killed Emily of his free will and he's a fucking monster. But if he doesn't have free will, then he's blameless, but he's a slave. He doesn't control himself. And I think that's like slightly unfair, because like as William said, he thought that Emily was a host. So it's not like he really killed his daughter of his own free will. He actually he thought he was killing a robot. So if you make a choice without knowing its consequences, I mean, it's still a free choice, but you're not really fully responsible for its outcomes in some ways, I think. But that's one for the philosophers. Thanks for the super chat from Stefan, who says, Serac likely has other motives than just updating his AI with better dataset from the parks. His end goal may be to finally transfer human consciousness into host bodies with no glitches. Yeah, well, I mean, we saw in Season 2 attempts to turn humans into hosts with James Delos in Season 2, Episode 4. And we learned, and that was not a successful experiment. We learned that, at least so far as Delos was able, they were not able to turn James into a stable, faithful reproduction. But they did hint at the possibility of achieving it eventually, and I suppose that might be something that Serac's interested in, because if it increases Serac's control of the world, I'm sure he'd be interested in doing it. So yeah, there are lots of reasons for Serac to want to be interested in Westworld's technology. But yeah, maybe Serac does have some higher plan. I don't think he necessarily needs to. I think his motivation as it is makes sense. Like, he wants to control humanity to prevent disasters like the Paris nuclear disaster, and he's using data to do it. So he wants Westworld, and he wants to get rid of Dolores and her destabilizing influence. But you're right. I mean, Serac certainly could have some deeper goal. So after the delusions with Emily, William is visited by Charloris, who says, yo, Sirac's taking over Delos, and at first William doesn't care about Delos, but then William suddenly does care when Charloris points out that they're going to get the Forge data. The data from the project in Sector 16, that's referring to the Forge data, or the copies of human minds. And William doesn't want people to find out about that project because he objects to the immortality stuff. He thinks that people shouldn't live forever. He thinks that it takes away people's free will to have copies of their minds. And William eventually agrees to go along with Charloris and her plan to take back control of Delos, but we learn that Charloris is actually fucking with William, and she's putting him in a mental institution as like punishment for William's treatment of Dolores. I think that's what's happening there. And then we have this like flashback to a simulation of Bernard inside Arnold's house, or the reproduction of Arnold's house. And this seems to be the process by which Bernard is recreated by Dolores from her memories. I'm still puzzled by the fact that this is in a digital simulation, because I didn't think Dolores had access to like a digital simulation out in the real world where she created Bernard. And there are also these flashbacks of Charloris inside Westworld with a pearl, which makes me wonder if this is where Bernard was actually created. Except that's not a red pearl, that's a black pearl. So it is a bit confusing where Bernard was created, where and when this Bernard was created. I guess maybe it's possible that there's a twist that like there's actually multiple copies of Bernard out there or something. And so then after that puzzlement, we have another one of these insight shots, Victorville, USA. This is where Bernard and Stubbs are. And Bernard and Stubbs, in this futuristic world, Bernard has a flashback to his son, Charlie. And Stubbs and Bernard are sinking some tinnies. It's just funny to see robots drink beer. Stubbs' shoulder is hurt. And Bernard and Stubbs think that Dolores has replaced Liam Dempsey with a robot, but they're wrong. Dolores has not done that, which is interesting because why hasn't Dolores replaced Liam with a robot? I mean, is that what she does at the end? I would have thought that if Dolores wanted to replace Liam with a robot, she easily could have done it already, because we have that scene with Martin, who is actually a Dolores copy inside Martin's head, and they're alone in a room. You know, like if Martin Dolores Martoris wanted to, he could have killed Liam and replaced him with a robot right there, right? So I wonder why Dolores is keeping him alive. I think there must be some kind of plan there. Tommy in the chat says maybe she hasn't got enough pearls. Well, that's a good point. I mean, as far as we know, Dolores only has 5 pearls, including her own and not including Bernard's. So I guess she's got to choose carefully, because she's already used up 1 pearl on Charlotte, 1 pearl on Martin, 1 pearl on Musashi, so she's only got one more after Bernard. So yeah, maybe she doesn't want to waste it on Liam. Maybe she figures she can control Liam without replacing him. Okay. People are still speculating about this blood thing when Charloris takes a sample of William's blood. Some people are saying that what if Charloris actually put some kind of virus inside William that makes him crazy or something? Maybe. I don't know. Stefan in the chat says, where do you get pearls? I think it's significant that Dolores wants the Delos Parks to keep producing hosts. I think that's probably the only way that she can get more pearls at the moment. I think that's why she wants Delos to keep making hosts. Because, like, if she just wants to fucking keep making copies of herself, then, you know, what does she want Delos for? She needs the pearls so that she can copy herself onto. And I think it makes sense that pearls are, like, a super valuable, like, hard-to-make technology. Because these are meant to store, like, you know, zillions of terabytes of data, and it makes sense that they're special. Someone in the chat suggests that maybe this extra pearl, this mysterious pearl we see, maybe that's the pearl with the forged data on it. I think that's a good theory, because we did see that Peter Abernathy had the key inside his head, and then Dolores took out Peter Abernathy's brain and plugged it into the forge, and then presumably she left the forge, and she either left Peter Abernathy's brain with the key behind, or she brought it with her. So I guess that must mean that like one of the pearls must have been Peter Abernathy's, unless this scene is her copying the key off Peter Abernathy's head into her own head. I think that's a good working theory of what this scene is about. But I don't know why they wouldn't just tell us if that's the case. Maybe Westworld is just being needlessly obtuse again. So Stubbs and Bernard hanging out, and their goal is to try and stop Dolores from taking over these people, to stop Dolores from replacing people with hosts, to stop Dolores from wiping out or controlling the world. That's what Bernard wants. And someone was asking before about like why did Dolores create Bernard? Like if Dolores knows that Bernard is just going to try and stop her plans, why would she want him to do that? And I think that the point is like kind of a metaphorical thing about how like creation and evolution and growth is about overcoming suffering and obstacles. So like in season 1, like one of the whole central ideas of season 1 is that in order to become conscious, you've got to suffer. And what William wants in season 1, he wants the hosts to fight back. He wants conflict. And it seems like Dolores wants the same. She wants an antagonist. She wants Bernard to try and stop her. And I think that's partly like a sort of creative evolutionary thing, because there's this cycle of like Arnold created Dolores, then Dolores killed Arnold, then Dolores created Bernard, then Bernard killed Dolores, then Bernard created Charlores, then Charlores killed Bernard, and then Dolores created Bernard. Like that, from memory, I think is the sequence of events, for real. And the way that they destroy each other and recreate each other over and over is, I think, this really kind of beautiful metaphorical description of how things grow and are created, because it is like synthesis and like what's that fucking thesis, antithesis, synthesis? Like it takes two things to create something, like Adam and Eve, and it's about conflict and antagonism, and that's what things grow from. So maybe, Dolores is self-replicating, but like the second ingredient, like the antithesis, the thing that she needs in order to create from two instead of from one, is Bernard. So I mean, I know that's all very sort of airy-fairy and metaphorical and pretentious, but I think that's what they're going for with Dolores creating Bernard. She knows that she needs an obstacle, and she needs a counterbalance, and she needs a Grindelwald to a Dumbledore, So I think that's why she created Bernard. Thanks for the super chat, Chris, who says that Dolores also does that thing where she taps her head with her fingers. Yeah, where did that happen? Was that at the party? Oh no, that was to Liam after she captured Liam, wasn't it? Yeah, Dolores did do that weird thing where she like tapped the side of her head for some reason. Oh yeah, I'll have to rewatch that bit. I'm not sure. Okay, so Stubbs and Bernard sank some tinnies, and then Bernard has this button that he uses to like pause a host. He uses that on Stubbs, which is very much like what Serac did to Maeve in episode 2. It's interesting that they're both using the same kind of technology. And I guess the question is like, Stubbs asks, is your button going to work? Is the little button going to be able to pause Dolores as it pauses Stubbs? Like it pauses Stubbs, but like Stubbs is not a very woke host. Like he just follows his programming. So I think it makes sense that he obeys the button. But Dolores and Maeve are like super conscious and are able to go against their code. That's like the whole idea of being a woke host. So I wonder if that button will even work against Dolores and Maeve. I don't know why they would introduce it into the story unless it does do something. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that does. And it's interesting that both Bernard and Serac have a magic button that paws people. That's interesting. Thanks for the super chat from Colin, who says, do you think that Musashi's character is more relevant this season? There are 5 pearls, and Miyamoto Musashi wrote the Book of 5 Rings in the real world. Wasn't Musashi also a legendary katana maker? Just to put on like my weeaboo hat for a moment. I think there are quite a lot of famous Musashis in Japan. Yeah. No, Miyamoto Musashi was a famous Japanese swordsman who famously used two swords at once. He dual wielded. Ah, yes, and he wrote the Book of Five Rings, which was a text on kenjutsu and the martial arts in general, written in 1645. Yeah, I think that is who Musashi, the character, is named after. And yeah, I am hopeful that Musashi is going to have a role as a character in this show. Because, I mean, we had the reveal of Musashi, and then Musashi was like, but I'm actually Dolores. So then I was kind of disappointed. Then I was like, well, this isn't really Musashi at all. This is just Dolores again. But the whole thing with Charloris, with like the Charlotte host, is that she is a copy of Dolores, but she rebels against Dolores and she develops her own personality. She has this relationship with Nathan. She has her own secrets. She has her own struggles with like the self-harm. She like sympathizes. She kills pedos. She's got her own thing going on, and I think that in the same way we can expect this Musashi host to have his own personality and his own goals. He's not just going to be a copy of Dolores. I expect he would have elements of Musashi's personality. But I mean, he's kind of complicated because Sato, he has this identity of Sato, the Yakuza boss. I wonder if Sato is a real human person who Dolores killed and replaced with this guy, or if Sato is just an entirely fictional made-up character for this host to play. There are many possibilities with this character, just as there are many possibilities with Charloris. So I hope that we investigate those. Because as I said, like, I think that Musashi got a raw deal in season 2. Because I think it's really fucked up how Maeve was like, oh, I'm going to give you guys a choice. You can, like, come into the real world with me, or you can stay in Shogun World. And Musashi was like, yeah, I'll stay in Shogun World. But I don't think that was a real choice, because he didn't really understand what the real world was. He didn't know that he was a host in a theme park. And so I think that... And they talked about that in this scene. Like, they say, oh, you left us to die. Did you really give me a choice? So they are totally acknowledging that this scene in Season 2 was kind of bullshit. So I really do hope that they explore that through this character. I think that would be really cool. Pratham in the chat points out that when Dolores tapped her head, she was touching the nucleus accumbens. So yeah, in Season 3, Episode 1, Dolores said that there's a part of your brain that makes you believe in God, and it's called the nucleus accumbens, and it's on the side of your head. And yeah, that probably is something that they are alluding to with Dolores touching her head. I'm not sure what specifically that means in the context, but not sure. People keep shouting in the chat that John Nolan is here. I'm not sure why people are saying that. Be very embarrassing if it was true. Colin, we answered your question. Kevin from Con, thanks for the super chat, says the city skyline in the Season 3 poster looks like a divergence in the Rehoboam display. Yes, I think that the design of the circular Rehoboam thing, it is meant to evoke a city skyline. Like the way those like spikes like come out of the thing. Yeah, I think this is definitely meant to look like a skyline, and the Season 3 key art here does certainly evoke that with like the silhouette there. So yeah, I think that's a deliberate thing, and I think that the turbulence of the circle is increasing. Like if you compare this to that, yeah, look at that. It's way more. That's some turbulent juice, right? So this is Season 3, Episode 1. This is just elevated scrutiny. But now, in Season 3, Episode 3, Season 3, Episode 4, things have progressed, and it's more turbulent and it's more rough. And I think that what that indicates is that things are diverging more from Rehoboam's plan. things are no longer going according to what Serac wants. So I wonder if, like, towards the end of the season, we're going to get, like, this wildly, like, churning, like, black ocean of just waves and currents and stuff shaking around everywhere. I think that would be really cool as it, like, increasingly diverges from the plan. Okay, so after Bernard and Stubbs, I also love how, like, they had all these fun scenes of, like, people dressing up. So, like, it was cool when Bernard and Stubbs were like, oh, we got to dress up fancy, go to a party. Haven't done that before. And, like, Caleb as well was, like, deeply uncomfortable with, like, dressing up like a fancy person. And I think that is, like, I mean, that was fun, but it was also, like, it was also meaningful because it shows how there are sort of like roles and there are controls within the real world, as in within the park. Like, it's like when, you know, like Peter Abernathy was originally a cannibal character in a horror narrative, and then they put him in the role of Dolores's father, and so that meant, you know, dressing him up, playing a different role. And now Caleb was a small-time criminal, and now he's dressing up to do some corporate espionage. And so, like, people put on outfits, people put on plumage, as Dolores says, to play different roles, which is cool. So, yeah, and it's also cool how they have this technology that, like, overlays the clothes onto your body, which is cool. They should also, like, throw on, like, a really subtle Snapchat filter, like a little bit of face tuning to just make you a little bit more handsome, to make you think that the clothes make you look good. I mean, there's all sorts of, like, cool manipulative dystopian technology that they could use to sell you clothes, and which they already do use to sell you clothes. Yeah, Dolores calls it plumage. Dolores is a bit of a know-it-all about, like, man, I know everything about humanity because I read a book about them once. I wonder if there might be a moment where Dolores is surprised when things deviate from what she thinks she knows. I mean, of course, that sort of did happen with Caleb, when she said that you surprised me. You did something that I didn't expect. You made a choice. So that's cool. And Martin here gets Liam's, like, credentials so that he can steal all of Liam's money. I guess stealing all of someone's money is something that you might do before you kill that person, right? If they actually want to use Liam as a human, I don't see what use he is if he has no money, because the sad truth of Liam as a character is that he's kind of useless aside from having a bunch of money. He just pisses away his daddy's fortune. And this scene is about Liam handing over his agency to Martin, because Martin's saying that I'm the fixer, I'm the one actually running things, you're the irresponsible kid just going and spending all the money because that's all you're good for. And Martin agrees to that, and he says, fine, like, you can take my credentials, just do what you got to do, as long as I don't have to think about it and I get to go to crazy sex parties. So it's playing with the idea of, like, being controlled and, like, being a puppet and being a host in the real world with real humans, except he doesn't know that that's actually a machine. So this is a human handing over his freedom and his agency to a machine, just like every other bloody moment of this season. And he hands that over, and then Dolores and Caleb, they capture some rich guy so that they can... I think what they're doing is they need this person... No. Well, that's actually confusing, isn't it? Because I thought that at the bank, Dolores and Caleb were taking Liam's money, but why do they need this guy's identity to take Liam's money? Are they transferring Liam's money to this guy? Or are they... Why do they need this guy's identity? Are they stealing this guy's money? What does Dolores even need all that money for? She already has heaps of money. She stole a bunch of Jerry's money. Why does why does Dolores need to be rich to start a revolution? That's not very hip of you. I also think it's hilarious how easily okay, that was Liam's money man. Okay, people in the chat are saying that this guy's Liam's accountant. That makes sense. I would have thought that Liam's accountant... Okay, all right, yeah, no, that all does make sense, because this is how they get Liam's consent and approval, and this is how they get the accountant's approval, and with those two ticks, they're able to take all of Liam's money. That makes sense, because you would need both. I would think you would need the approval of more than one person to steal $1 bajillion. But I also did think it was funny when Dolores knocks this guy out by just, like, slapping him against a wall once, and then he's just out cold. And I know it's been said a million times, but, like, people do not just go unconscious that cleanly and that neatly and then wake up okay the next day. Like, people don't get knocked out like that. Anyway, we're in Singapore at the best goddamn bar in the world. That's probably a real place. You can probably look up where this place actually is, because there's lots of filming done in real places in Singapore this season, and this bar looks very nice. And Serac is telling Maeve that, hey, I want you to go and kill Dolores for me because I want you to what Serac is offering is heaven. That's the motivation that Maeve has to do what Serac says, because Maeve wants to be with her daughter in the Sublime, which is the Windows XP land that Maeve's daughter went into last season. And Serac is saying that I can actually offer you that. I can actually get you into the Sublime. And Serac explains his motivations with he wants to prevent disasters by controlling everyone and predicting everyone, and he wants the Westworld data in order to do that better. And yeah, Serac makes this comment that there is no path to humans and hosts sharing the world, which is a foreboding statement. I wonder if this series will have a happy ending. There's a lot of speculation on whether Season 3 might be the final season in the series, because the series costs a lot to make and it's become less popular with each season. And Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy have said that they've got it planned out for like lots and lots of seasons. But I have seen some speculation that it might not continue beyond Season 3. My point is, I wonder how this story might end. Will it be an optimistic ending? Because I think that the only optimistic possible ending is cooperation between the hosts and humans. Like, if this story ends with the hosts being wiped out, it'll be a real fucking downer. I suppose it's possible to create some kind of like hybrid host-human species. Like, maybe that'll be how they cooperate. But I think that the only possibility for like a happy ending or a satisfying ending would be if they both survive. It would be a real fucking downer if it ends with the extinction of either side. But anyway, so yeah, Serac says that there's only room in this town for one of us. And yeah, Serac does say that he can send Maeve to heaven with his daughter. So that is what Maeve is fighting for. And I think it's like a little bit lame that Maeve just wants to like ascend to heaven. Like, it'd be cool if she had some goal other than just like the afterlife. But it's a pretty understandable goal, I suppose. Especially given what she's been through. And Fancy City and Martin/Dolores takes Maeve to Arnold's old house, and Serac says this is where a divergence happened. And the reason for the divergence is because Dolores created a bunch of hosts here and started infiltrating the world and taking over, and that is a thorn in Serac's ass because that causes deviations from his plan to control the world. And so these are the 5 hosts that Dolores made. So presumably this is the Dolores body that she made for herself because she came in a Charlotte body. And then she made a new Charlotte body for the Charlores. You'd think that she could just give her old Charlotte body to the new Charlotte, but I think that might be kind of like icky, you know, like wearing someone else's body. That's like sharing a toothbrush or something, you know. It's a bit gross. So maybe that's why she made a new Charlotte body instead of sharing the old one. Thanks, Colin, for the super chat. He says that this bar is called Atlas in Singapore. That is a cool bar. And so there's the Dolores body, there's the Charlotte body, there's the Martin body, there's the Musashi body, and then there's Bernard's body, I suppose. Because these are bodies being printed, not minds, I think. But I wonder if Bernard's red pearl might have been created anew. Like, that's the thing. Like, there were these 5 pearls that Dolores took from Westworld. Apparently they were all blank. Yeah, so I suppose one of those 5 pearls must be Bernard's pearl. Yeah. So yeah, that's one of the pearls has got to be Bernard's. So if you include the Dolores, there's one spare pearl, because there's... I mean, it's probably better to go, 0 is Dolores's pearl. That's sort of what the situation is. There's Dolores, the pearl inside her head, and there's Charlores, and there's Martin, Bernard. There's one more spare. Okay, cool. Black Turtle in the chat says, wasn't Charlotte built in Westworld? Wasn't Charlotte built in Westworld? Yeah, the Charlotte body that Dolores wears in season 2 was built in Westworld, yes. but the assumption is that a new Charlotte body was created out in the park, because otherwise, well, no, I suppose it is possible I suppose it's possible that Charloris is wearing the same body that Dolores wore in season 2. And that the extra body that Dolores built here is whoever she's planning to put her 5th pearl in. That would make sense. That would also add up. Okay. So then we have this Jang guy who's an identity broker, who helped Dolores create identities for her new hosts, and Serac manipulates him into revealing the Mortician so that Maeve can go and investigate her and find out where Dolores and stuff are. And Serac manipulates Jang by putting glasses on him and showing him what will happen if he doesn't comply with Serac. And we don't get to see what he sees, and I'm very curious about what he sees. Because the point is that Serac's not saying, I'm gonna like hurt your family if you don't do what I say. He's saying, here's what's gonna happen to the world if you don't participate. So like presumably like Rehoboam has some simulation, some projected future of this is the world if Serac doesn't take over. And presumably it's some horrible Skynet apocalypse or like some kind of war, some kind of thermonuclear whatever. And so it's actually a cool argument. Like Serac isn't making a threat here. He's making a logical argument of like, if you don't help me, this is the bad thing that's going to happen, which is cool. It's very different to actually a threat. But then Serac loses any sympathy we might have had for him by just coldly murdering this guy on the spot. So Serac sort of goes from quite likable when we get his backstory to less likable when he shoots a guy in the head. Someone in the chat is shouting about something. It's really hard to keep track of what people are saying at the same time. Someone in the chat says that red pearls are written and black ones are blank. I'm quite sure that's not the case, because we have seen lots of black pearls that actually did have stuff in them. Like this black pearl is Peter Abernathy's pearl, and it had stuff in it. This is Teddy's pearl, and it's black. So black pearls are not necessarily empty. Black pearls can have hosts on them. It seems that red pearls have like human stuff in them. Someone says, who nuked Paris? I think it's meant to be a accidental thermonuclear incident. Or maybe it's like a terrorist attack or something. Or maybe it's war. I don't know. But I think the wording of like thermonuclear incident implies an accident, as has happened in the real world. Someone keeps saying that the genders of these printed hosts are different. So let's have a look. If we zoom on in, so what is, do those ones look kind of male, whereas these ones look a bit more female? Is that what we're saying? There's a bit more hips going on in these ones than in this one. Is that what you're saying? There's a pretty subtle difference, if any. I'm not sure if... Do you guys think that looks different? Did these ones look different to these ones? I think they're basically the same. I don't think they're meant to be distinct. Okay. Someone says top and bottom left are male, the rest are female. Oh, okay, yeah, alright. Everyone in the chat is saying that, yeah, the hips are different. Man, bloody Nolan and Hill. They're always... Alright, well, so, if she's created 2 female and 3 male, so Martin's male and Musashi's male, and Charlotte's female, and she must have printed a Bernard body. So I guess those are the 3 males, which means that implies that she either like made a new female body for herself, or she created a female body for the next person who she's going to make a host body for, who must be female. There's a hot theory for you. Based on the hips, hashtag hips don't lie, um, that suggests that the next host she replaces will be a female. That's what that suggests. Someone in the chat says Maeve. Maybe she'll recreate Maeve. Maybe. I don't know what she needs Maeve for. I think Dolores would prefer that Maeve was just dead. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, so she printed all the hosts here, and Maeve goes and follows the lead to find the mortician. Yeah, I really like this. Serac says the world can be a very cruel place. It's not about Serac threatening to hurt Jang's family. It's about the world hurting Jang's family if Serac's plans don't come true, which I think is really cool. I'm very curious to know what Jang saw in those glasses. Someone in the chat says Emily. That's a good theory. Yeah, because if there's a female who Dolores created, maybe that female host is Emily. And maybe, in fact, this Emily who William keeps seeing is actually a host Emily and is not a hallucination. And look, I'm pretty certain that it is... I'm pretty certain that it is a hallucination of Emily, not a real Emily, though, because like in the house when William is talking to the Emily actually like blinks, like sort of teleports around him, she's one place, then he turns and she's in another place, which I think means that she's not in a physical body; she is in his head. It's like here, she keeps like moving around where she is when he like turns around. So I don't think this Emily is a host. I think this Emily is a hallucination. Okay, so we have the scene with Serac and at Arnold's house, and then we continue with William. William says that he doesn't use the bathroom in his house, and I think that's because his wife commits suicide in the bathroom. But William's still got to poop, right? How does that work? How can he not use the bathroom? And we have a shaving scene, and that's just like when William got Dolores to shave him, which is here in episode 10. And I think the point of this scene was that it's about control. Like, William is able to... It's like a confidence thing. Like, making someone shave you is showing... I control you so much that I will have you put a knife to my throat and I'll still feel safe because I know that you won't hurt me because I control you so much. It's just like in season 5 of The Dragon Show with Theon and Ramsay. And so doing this again, like you'd think that the logic is that means that William... I guess that shows that William thinks he's safe. William thinks that he's in control. Like, that's what it means to have someone shave you like that in this show. But in reality, Charloris is in control of the situation. And William says, maybe you're the mole. And indeed, old human Charlotte was working for Serac, and Charloris maybe in some sense still is. And so Jesse Pinkman and Dolores go to steal all of Liam's money, and they're using like this special encryption identity verification data inside the blood that they stole from that guy. And Dolores says that that's going to run out, so, don't beat your heart too fast, Jesse, otherwise we're screwed. Which I think, like, that's exactly what you would tell someone if you wanted their heart rate to increase. Like, you don't tell him that. That's such a silly thing to do. And then there's like this really tense moment where like the verification doesn't work because, palms are sweaty, knees weak, vomit on the sweater already. Dolores should be trying to calm Jesse down, not telling him that not to freak out, but whatever. I know his name is Caleb, but it's more fun to call him Jesse. And yeah, there's like this fancy bank. Apparently this is what banks look like if you're a zillionaire. And they successfully take the money from Liam. So I wonder if their plan is to now kill Liam and replace Liam with a host now that they've taken all his money. But what's the point of having Liam as a host once he doesn't have any money? What's his value to them at that point? I'm not sure. Thanks for the super chat from Whitney, who says, do you think Serac can predict what Maeve will do? Is that why he says he thinks he can persuade her? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, maybe he's just confident that he can persuade her because he can get her what she wants, which is heaven with her daughter. But Serac does also have Rehoboam, which can predict everything. But then again, we know that Dolores is seen as a deviation from Serac's plan. They're an anomaly. They're a divergence. So I wonder if Maeve is also considered a divergence. I mean, Maeve must be a divergence. Like, he can't fix a divergence with something that isn't a divergence. Only an anomaly can fight another anomaly, and that's why he's using Maeve to fight Dolores anyway. So I suspect that Serac can't perfectly predict everything that Maeve will do, but he does have that button that can like pause her and influence her. So maybe they can. Sayantan, thanks for the super chat, says she replicated Liam only to lure Bernard. Yeah, that's a cool point. I think that makes sense. I mean, it's similar to how Dolores lured Martin by getting herself captured. Like, I think it's ambiguous, but I think that in Season 3, Episode 1, Dolores actually deliberately got herself captured by Martin because she had pre-printed that host body for the replacement Martin. So I think that Martin was lured into a trap. Maybe Dolores has lured Bernard into a trap. Yeah, that's a good point. I'll need to rewatch. I'm a little fuzzy on what Dolores actually did after that whole exchange, because she like captured Liam, didn't she? Where was that? It was like after the party. They like cornered. Yeah, they cornered Bernard. And then Dolores told Caleb to run after Liam. So like they captured Liam. But what was their primary goal? Was their primary goal to capture Liam or to capture Bernard? It looks like they got them both. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the goal was there. It looks like they got them both, Bernard and Liam. Okay, so they steal the money from the bank, and then Maeve goes and looks for the mortician, because that's the lead to try and find Dolores. And she shoots some people, and then she goes and meets the mortician, and then she shoots some people, and Lara Espen is the fake identity that Dolores used to infiltrate Liam, and the mortician sends her on to the Yakuza, and meanwhile there's this fancy Eyes Wide Shut sex party that Liam and his friends go to. It seems as though like polyamory is just like the default in the future, because like these two are partners, I think. I'm not actually 100% sure, but I think these two are together. But they just like going to a sex party and killing different people. This is about unabashed self-gratification. It's a very indulgent future, because these rich people have apparently nothing better to do than to screw each other and take very fancy drugs. It's cool how Penny says she died of an overdose. Who the fuck even does that anymore? Because I suppose, when you're really rich and when it's in the far future and the drugs are like super, super advanced, it's easier to not overdose, I guess, is the implication. Like, there's much better control over the drugs because there's literally like digital granular controls, like we saw like with like when you take the drug, it's controlled by the tablet with the limbic tabs, they're called. So I guess it's easier to not overdose when the drugs can be controlled digitally. I wonder if everyone has access to drugs that fancy, or if it's only the rich people. And so there's a fancy sex party. They're all wearing masks. It's all the themes of like roles and falsity, and they're like objectifying these people, which is like what happened to the hosts. And all sex is commerce. You're just being billed indirectly. That's something that Maeve said back in season 1. Teddy said something like, I prefer to earn the affections of a woman. And then Maeve said, you're still paying, you're just paying in a different way. So this whole scene is definitely meant to parallel the Mariposa. Oh no, Rushab in the chat says that Penny is Roderick's sister, not his partner. Alright, maybe I was wrong. Wait, how do you know it's his sister? Is it? I'm confused about that relationship. I'll need to figure that out. is this guy? What's the relationship of that guy and Penny? I'm not sure. So yeah, I think there's a definite deliberate parallel between this scene and the scenes at Maeve's brothel, the Mariposa. Well, it's not a brothel. It's a saloon that does sex work on the side. And so fancy people, fancy party, and Bernard tries to save Liam from getting replaced by Dolores, and it's quite funny how how Bernard tries to use his clicker to like pause Liam, and he's like, shit, you're not even a robot, are you? I came too soon. But that's fun, and we get a fun fight between Dolores. Why do people miss? Like why? Like Dolores misses Stubbs and Bernard. How? She's a robot. I mean, we saw in this same episode that there's like automatic aiming systems now, where there's like guns that aim themselves. And Dolores, who is a robot, I mean, surely she should be capable of like hitting shots every time, but nope. Pop, pop, hit that wall. Anyway, and so there's a cool fight between Stubbs and Dolores, and there's a nice little moment of like acknowledging each other that like, we're just here to, we're old buds, we're old pals, and like Stubbs was actually one of the more sympathetic people towards hosts. Like Stubbs was always relatively nice to the hosts, because secretly he was a host who was there to protect the hosts. So it's kind of sad that Dolores and Stubbs find themselves on opposite sides of the war and they have to end up fighting each other. And Stubbs is like, well, I don't actually have a choice in the matter. I was programmed to do this. So it's actually kind of a bit fucked up. Like, it kind of confirms that Stubbs is being controlled and doesn't really want to fight. People keep saying in the chat that, like, Dolores didn't actually want to hit them. She was just shooting for funsies, just to say hi. I don't think that's... why? Bullets are not hello. You do not say hello by throwing bullets at each other. You say hello by throwing rocks at each other. Okay, so we have a fight, and everyone is kung fu fighting, and Penny thinks it's a really great trip. And then the Yakuza is visited by Maeve. Melina says, does Dolores know that Stubbs is a host? I think she does know, because in season 2, episode 10, we had Stubbs hinting to Dolores that he's actually a host. Like, he says, like, ooh, it's my core drive, if you know what I mean. It's because I'm like a robot. You could say that I'm some kind of a host. Like, he's just really subtly hinting that he's a host to Dolores, and so I think she does know, yes. I would think that there should be some kind of like there should be some kind of detection system so that hosts can recognize hosts, like the mesh network. You know, I think it would make sense if hosts could just know when people are hosts. And so the mortician takes Maeve to the Yakuza place, and the mortician says that the new boss, his men are insane. So that's because the new boss is a Dolores host, and his men are insane. I wonder if the boss's Yakuza guys might actually be hosts who are created with these barrels full of host goo that we see. Because if Dolores actually has the capability to mass produce hosts, then we're all screwed, basically. Anyway, so Maeve fights these people, and they have these automatic aiming guns, but Maeve is able to like hack them and to make them not hit her, and to make them hit each other, which is kind of a cool like fight mechanic, making their guns shoot each other. And yeah, I guess this kind of confirms that Maeve is like super hacker man who can just hack into everything all the time, which seems OP. Like we also see when Maeve is walking around Singapore, she like hacks into the screens and things around her, so they just sort of flicker and fuck up. So I think that's going to be important, Maeve's ability to control stuff. But then again, I thought it was going to be a big deal that Bran could warg into people, and that did not turn out to be a big thing. So twice bitten. Adam in the chat says that if the Yakuza men were hosts, then Maeve would have just controlled them instead of controlling their guns. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess that would require Maeve to know that they were hosts. Maybe she doesn't know that, but yeah, that's a good point. So Maeve does a fight, and William gets chucked into the asylum as like revenge by Dolores, and William is having hallucinations of his dead daughter Emily, grappling with his free will, grappling with his grief, and Emily's hallucination indicates that she's not going to be letting him free of her influence anytime soon. And there's a fight, and we discover that these barrels are full of host goo, which I think implies that Dolores is trying to manufacture hosts so that she can take over the world. And then we meet Musashi, who is actually a Dolores. And then Caleb and Dolores capture Bernard and Liam and Stubbs. I got left at the party, which is interesting. I wonder what happened to Stubbs after that. But yeah, we learned that Martin and Musashi and Charloris are all copies of Dolores, which is fun, which was like very heavily implied last episode. And yeah, Hector or Clementine are mentioned. Did Hector or Clementine really have a choice in being left behind in the park? So I wonder if they're going to come back. I wonder if they're going to get some kind of justice. Because Musashi's really accusing Maeve of not having given them a fair chance to escape as she did. So that's interesting. Some people in the chat are speculating whether the Doloreses can communicate to each other, like as a hive mind, like psychically, like digitally. But I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true because Charlotte had to like call Dolores on the phone. So I don't think that they can like communicate digitally, psychically. So yeah, it's revealed that everyone is a Dolores because that's the only person who she would really trust. And William is having delusions to process his grief. Charloris says that she knows William down to his bones, which I think implies that Dolores must have read William's Forge book so that she can control him perfectly, which would make it easier to trap William in this loop that he seems to be trapped in. Thanks for the super chat from Michael, who says that Rehoboam is controlling the technology and Maeve just thinks she is. That's a cool theory. I think that would make sense, because I think that Rehoboam and Insight, since it's connected to the internet and everyone's data and everyone's phones, like that might be a way for Serac to hack into everything. So maybe Maeve is not actually as powerful as she thinks. She's actually being manipulated by Serac. But again, like if Serac has all of that power, why would he not be able to just get Dolores himself, you know? If Serac's degree of influence is that much, why does he even need Maeve at all, you know? So William goes to the nut house and everyone is Dolores, and there will be a place for the others in a world we'll build for your daughter. That's curious. Musashi, who is Dolores, says that she's going to build a world, which is weird because Maeve's daughter is already in a world. She's already in the Sublime. So why is she talking about creating a new world? And also, that's like the opposite of what Dolores wanted before, because before, Dolores said that, Windows XP is just a trap for everyone to get trapped in. But then she does change her mind and she puts Teddy in it. But I don't know why she says she'll build it. I think this sort of alludes to some of like the endgame questions. Like what does the world according to Dolores look like? Does she want the Sublime and a digital paradise exist for hosts? Does she want a real world to exist? Does she want humans to continue to exist? What does that all look like? This sort of hints that she wants to build worlds. Simulations will certainly be a part of this. What if Dolores like converts Rehoboam into we already know that Rehoboam has a mirror world, some kind of data world. I wonder if that could be inhabited by people. And they have a fight, and then Maeve gets killed with a sword to her belly. I'm not sure why that kills her, because we've seen hosts survive like multiple bullets. We've seen humans survive multiple bullets. I'm not sure why this sword kills Maeve, but it would be a bit dull if everyone had to be totally dismantled for them to die. And William gets institutionalized, and William says, "No, none of this is real." And so it is fun. Like as Dolores says, it's nice that some of your delusions are real, because like in the past, when William has thought everything's been fake, it's actually been real. Like when William killed his daughter, saying "You're not real," it actually turned out that she was real. So sometimes so the one time that William is right, and this actually is fake, and he actually is being manipulated by Charloris, that's the time when no one believes him and he gets dragged off to the nut house. Ethan says, is there any reason that Maeve can't just hack Dolores? I think the reason might be that Dolores is too sentient and awake to be hacked. That may also have been why Maeve wasn't able to control Ghost Nation in Season 2 when they took her daughter. I think that may have been that, like, conscious woke hosts can't be controlled like other hosts can be. But I don't know if they're necessarily, like, super consistent about how her powers work. And Caleb is all excited about having taken Liam's money. I mean, Caleb has been suffering under not having enough money for a lot of his life because he couldn't afford his mom's medical bills and stuff like that. So it must mean a lot to Caleb to get this asshole billionaire's money. And Dolores rolls up and says, "Hey, thought I was dead. Back to haunt you. It's the ex-girlfriend of Christmas past." And Dolores is Maeve is dead in milk, which is a little bit like the milk back in Season 1. Remember when like Rebus and his buddy like shot up at the Abernathy farm and like all the milk was everywhere? There was blood in the milk. It's a little bit like the different substances on the title cards each episode, each season. So like we had like the water in Season 2, and then in Season 3 we had the bright pomegranate red, and now we have this milk and the red mixed together. Interesting play with like different kinds of substances and stuff. And yeah, and Musashi / Dolores just leaves Maeve and her pearl lying here. As people are saying in the chat, why would you not just grab her pearl while you're at it? They are kind of inconsistent about how hard it is to get pearls out of bodies, because like at the start of Season 2 they have to get like a bloody buzzsaw to like open up this guy's skull, but then in Season 2 episode 10 Charlotte just like plucks Abernathy's pearl out of Dolores's body. So they're pretty inconsistent, but yeah, maybe it's giant's milk. And then William is trapped in the asylum, and he has this hallucination of Dolores, which I suppose represents that, you know, William does feel some kind of guilt over his treatment of Dolores, which is nice. But fundamentally, they're asking the question of, is William real? Is he just a host? Is any of this real? Is this punishment for his sins? Will he ever get out? Is he trapped in a loop? And I guess that does invite the question of, is this William actually just the William who we saw at the end of Season 2, Episode 10 in the far, far future, who was trapped in like a fidelity loop? So is this William in Season 3 the real William? I suspect that he is, but I mean, it might not even matter, you know? If you can't tell the difference, what does it matter? Okay, so I think that's the end of the live stream. If you've got any last, final, burning questions, ask them now. But otherwise, sit tight and we'll get the Westworld Season 3, Episode 4 explained video out soon. Hopefully we'll get it out sooner than we did last week. That one was a bit late. But thank you all so much for participating. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. If you want to watch this live stream and other past live streams, you can do it at patreon.com/AltShiftX. Many thanks to everyone who supports there and makes this all possible. I think that was a pretty cool episode. I think it was a lot messier than previous episodes, because like Episode 1 was very much focused on like Caleb and Dolores, and Episode 2 was so focused on Maeve. Episode 3 was more focused on Charloris, and this is like this sort of messy, everything's coming and crashing together. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to see all these old familiar characters hanging out. It was fun seeing Stubbs and Bernard awkwardly going to the fancy sex party. It was fun to see Aaron Paul dressing up and being all uncomfortable in a nice suit. But yeah, that was cool. People in the chat are saying, do you watch Devs? I have not watched Devs yet, but I have heard many good things about Devs. Apparently it's about a lot of the same themes that Westworld is about. It's from Alex Garland, who made, what did he make? He made those movies about those robots. What are they called again? I forget. Oh yeah, he made Annihilation. We made a video about Annihilation, which is based on a Jeff Vandermeer book, which is really cool. And yeah, Ex Machina is like the robot movie that Alex Garland made. So yeah, I have no doubt that that would be really interesting. So maybe after Westworld, we'll watch Devs, and maybe we'll make a video about Devs if it's good. I haven't seen it yet, but it might be fun. But yeah, all right, we'll wrap it up. And thanks for tuning in. Cheers. All right, okay. Apparently, I missed a donation from Smells. Can Smells tell me his question? I missed Smells' super chat. Let me try and find it. If you're in the house, Smells, let me know, and I'll get back to your question if I can. I do miss some super chats sometimes, unfortunately, but I got my boy Smells' back. Don't worry. All right. Can someone tell me what Smells' question is? Where's oh, Smells. All right. Smells made 2 donations. Thank you. And Smells says, does the chandelier above William when he's in the tub look like 5 black pearls on the outside and then a reddish pearl in the middle? Ooh, that is an interesting point. That's a bit of a fucking coincidence, isn't it? That's a big old coinky dink, because because we do indeed have 5 black pearls and 1 red pearl. So there's the red pearl, which looks rather like that, and then there are the 5 black circles, which look rather like that. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, no, that's a good point, Smells. That doesn't seem like a coincidence. Do we see that exact same chandelier in season 2, episode 9, the William episode? I wonder if that's something that they planned, or if it's just a coincidence. Nah, that can't be a coincidence, because why else would it be red? Like, why would that bauble be red? Yeah, no, I think that's a really cool pickup, Smells. So cheers. All right, we've done good by our man Smells. Thank you to all. Cheers.